Hello, and welcome to everyone. Welcome to Team Kreve set review for Way of the Witcher. I'm BFox, a Twitch streamer and content creator. I'm a member of Team Kreve, along with my co-hosts Lemon and Van and Munter. Say hi, guys. Van.
What's up? I am Van and Munter. You can also find me on Twitch. And just a quick thing on Team Kreve. We were founded in 2020. We've got a roster of players and creators. We're focusing on fun and competitive Gwent content and aim to provide competitive and meme-themed decks. And our Discord is definitely the best way to get involved with us, and it's linked in the description. It's open to everyone. It's a really fun place to hang out and talk Gwent. And we're currently in the middle of our Kreve League, which runs 3 times a year, open to everyone. And the next league signups are in February 2021 if you're interested. But yeah, definitely our Discord's the best way to get in contact with us. And yeah, Lemon?
Hello, I'm Lemon. Like the other two, I'm a Twitch streamer, and you can find us at our Twitch streams, which you can see on screen and in the description. Just a quick word about how we will be conducting the set review. So we're going through the cards one by one, giving a quick view on how strong we think each card will be and potential synergies. We've also given each card a rating from 1 to 5, where 1 is very, very weak, and 5 is very, very strong, where 3 is the sort of middle mark where a card is considered viable.
Excellent. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump into the review. Big one, make sure you like the video, guys. If you like what we're doing, get on it, give us a like. It's really going to support us. The Team Kreve channel is launching this video, so it's really important to get some momentum behind it. And subscribe to the channel if you want to get more of our content. There will be regular content coming through on this channel, so it'll be really great to have as subscribers. These are our just opinions, right? We will be expressing our opinions on these cards. We've talked about it in depth. We've talked about all the possible synergies. If you feel like there's something we've missed, if you feel like there's something we should add, if you just straight up disagree with us, make sure you get in the comment section below and let us know all about it. We'll be there for the next week or so, talking to you, interacting. Also, hit us up on the Discord if you've got anything you want to talk about. It'll be great to have you. For all that, let's get into it. So we're starting off with the neutrals from the Way of the Witcher set. We're all super excited about this set as well. Like, we think there's some really interesting things being done with the cards. There's some really awesome synergies. There is some pretty big whiffs in there, making a bomb. But let's get into it. Lemon, you're up first, brother.
Okay, so the first card we'll be looking at is Selective Mutation, which we have rated at 2.5, which is a little bit underviable. So this card is a cheap pseudo-tutor and a bit of a hand fixer that can allow you to get the adrenaline cards from this expansion into your hand, which is crucial because these tend to be the big finishes from this expansion. Now, this card usually plays as a 4 for 6, barring some synergy from Witcher Swarm, which isn't really amazing, but it could prove crucial for current their shenanigans, and is why I think this card might be played in conjunction with things like Koshchey.
That's a really interesting point. I never really considered the Caranthir interaction when I first sort of evaluated this card. To me, it just sort of seemed like a kind of weak tutor that put 4 points to the board. But, you know, the worst problem with Caranthir is when it's in your hand and your Detlef's in the deck, say. So this does really fix that problem.
Yeah, I think the tempo is a bit of an issue. Like, it is slow. And if you're playing it, it's probably playing it for round 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
For your adrenaline card. So yeah, only playing at 4 is a little slow. It's an alchemy, so it is tutorable by SK. Just a slight extra synergy that might work with something, but
yeah, that is
I'm
a
not
very
sure
interesting
if
point.
SK really needs this as a tutor, unless you're getting it for Arnegaard, perhaps.
Arnegaard is the thing I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, missing Arnegaard's pretty big if you're playing Arnegaard, so.
I mean, yeah, and that card looks like an absolute house, but...
Yeah, the thing with this is also, like, you need to run more than one adrenaline card, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, definitely. And how many adrenaline cards are we actually going to be running? I guess we won't know.
Quite a few, I think. Like, a lot of the bronzes are sprinkled with adrenaline, so you should always have a backup for this, I'd say.
Yeah.
Although you don't really want to be getting a bronze with this as well. You really just want a gold.
Yeah, like, you might even shuffle the bronze back, depending on your hand. Like, yeah.
Right. Next we have Maxii Van Dekkar. Now, you're probably going to hear me say this quite a bit today because it genuinely mean it. Very interesting card design. Personally, I can't see the applications of this card. I couldn't really find where the synergies were with it. Its ability is a little bit lackluster. Like, yeah, you get to look at your deck, but just shuffle it anyway if you don't like it. The one place I did see it seeing a little bit of play was maybe with a bank. It does make your bank better, but it is just a 6 for 6. It doesn't really impact the board stat in any other way. We sort of ended up on a 1.5 with it.
Yeah, I think even if it had the ability to put one on the top, put one on the bottom, like, I think that'd still be average. So
Not much else to
Not a
really
lot to
say about
say.
it, I guess, is there?
You don't get to tutor a specific card. I mean, you either look at your deck and you think it's fine, in which case just play the 6 for 6 and don't know how much that changes, or you get a shuffle, which isn't really guaranteed to help you that much. I'm sure you get to thin a card, I suppose, but you played a 6 for 6, which you could usually do better than that.
yeah, if there was any synergy with putting things on the bottom, besides like just getting rid of a card that you don't want to play, then
Yeah.
it would be a lot better.
The one thing that really jumped out at me straight away was, and this is mainly because I'm friends with Lemon, is maybe in hyper thin to ensure you're not drawing that T-ball and to fix that up. But his reaction was pretty much one of not worth it.
Help a little, but really, you want cards that actually thin and hyper thin, and this does not do that.
Alright. Berengar. So we settled on a rating of 3.5 for this card. It's a pretty solid point slam with how many witches are in the set, and it's neutral, so it's pretty flexible, but it also doesn't fit into any devotion decks, which I'm not sure how many we're going to see from now on, but looking at the current ones, SK and NR, I guess being a 9, it's good with Thrive, good reach. It does play into toll removal, but I don't think you're that sad if there's a toll removal used on this card, really.
I mean, we expect the Witcher condition to be met pretty easily, don't we?
Yeah, I reckon.
Yeah, I think we do.
Which essentially makes it just an unconditional 9 for 6, which is
I'm
really good.
really high on this. Like, if you're playing non-diversion and you have a bunch of witches, I don't think there's a reason not to run this. Really, it's a 9 for 6, which is crazy good.
I mean, the biggest problem I see with this card is if you sort of queue into a control mirror with it and you can't stick more than 2 witches, essentially. Like if you've got 1 witcher and then you play the Berengar, if you haven't got follow-up witches and stuff like that, your opponent has the potential to get a lot of removal value just by killing witches around this card.
Or just in a short round 3.
Yeah, exactly.
The upsides are crazy.
Yeah. There are a few cards that are awkward in short round 3, but
especially in this set.
Yeah.
And a Leo. So this card is very dependent on Witch's Swarm, which I'm not entirely sure how well the set actually supports. Skellige seems to have a little bit that can help with this, NR as well, although the NR bronzes don't seem amazing in this set, and seems like a struggle to set up a proper Witcher Swarm. And I'm not entirely sure if you'll be able to reach the value you want for this 7 provision card, and as a result, we've decided to rate this card at a 2.5.
You go, Beef.
I mean, it's a payoff, but again, like Lemon mentioned, how viable is Witcher Swarm going to be? Most of the Swarm comes from kind of gold packages, which is not very reliable. For an overall deck strategy, you sort of need that bronze support, which to me sort of, leads me to thinking this is going to end up just being a little bit weak.
Yeah, I think for 7, it's probably not going to find a lot more value than that. Like, it's not going to find the value you're wanting. Yeah. Snowdrop. So, we settled on a 3 for this one, and it's an interesting card. I really like the design. I think it would be good in any deck that maybe runs a discard package, especially because the discard package can also run into a few bricks. So the extra ability to shuffle them back into your deck, even while getting all the buffs from playing cards like Burner or any kind of drawing cards like even Coral. Worst case, it's a 6 with the ability to shuffle the cards back. And best case, maybe excluding like Coral, Dandelion, some cards that don't really see play, it could be a 14 with that ability.
It did actually just strike me as well that it will play for an 8 for 8 with certain stratagems on blue as well.
True.
Yeah.
So,
for Ouroboros being the key one.
The ceiling on this card I think is kind of scary with stuff like Burner and Coral and that sort of game plan. Like you said, I think it can definitely slip into a lippy deck that's already trying to do that consistency game plan, and now they're going to be able to generate points while they do it, which is kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, I kind of doubt that Coral will see play again, but with like just even the regular Lippy package of Burn and some of the 4P Bronze discard package, like this card can easily hit 8 provisions, and you're getting to work through your deck in a Lippy, potentially fix your hand. If you drew a Shield Maiden or Roach, you get to shuffle it back into deck instead of actually discarding it. So that flexibility is cool. And assuming that you do get a boost for each card when you do draw 2 together, like on the deploy, or sorry, the Zealed Order, I think this card is very, very solid.
Yeah, we are assuming that this card will proc for every instance of drawing a card, not like drawing 2 cards proccing as once.
Yeah, the way it reads, I think it will play, once you use the order, it'll be 6.
The 6 Fairy is good, and Engine is good. So, Idarran of Ulivo, this card is one of my favorites from the expansion. So whilst this is neutral, I look at this mainly as a monster card. You really are expecting to see it mainly with Caranthea. If you can use it with, say, Koshchey or a Kiki Queen, then you're able to spawn an extra copy of those high-end golds to connect those crazy strong engines. So it pretty much can replace the Death Shadow being removed a couple months ago. And we can see a return of these very, very high point value engine lists that have crazy good long rounds in monsters. I see this card being crazy strong, and that's why we've rated this at 4.5.
I mean, you can even get free debt laps with it,
Yeah.
which is, kind of scary.
No, it's doomed, so not really.
Of course. Yeah, sorry, my bad. It's obviously a very, very powerful card, isn't it? Like, you're generally going to be like with Caranthea spawning an engine. It could be another beast as well. Like, it's just It doesn't necessarily need sort of one specific card with Caranthea to work. Any of those, high value beast 7 provision targets, and even like Myruna is even not that bad with it as well. So I think this will probably see a lot of play, like Lemon said, with monsters. Is there anywhere else that sees play?
You could run it in a general swarm list to just try and swarm a little better. You could use it with like, I don't know, like a Carrack Frigate maybe. It's an extra 1 point volunteer, better Voimir. I don't see it being as valuable though in those decks, and it breaks devotion.
I don't think it's great in a frigate deck, but maybe with like, is it Dahlia spawn?
Yeah, I could see that.
Get another archer.
Depends on how those cards work. Yeah,
it depends how the interaction with that spawn is, I guess, isn't it? I mean, you could also run it with Alzur, but how good are 2 Kellys really? Triangle within a triangle. Boost an ally by its provision cost or damage an enemy by its provision cost. We went with a 2.5 as an overall rating, mainly because we really struggle to see it replacing Pog Slide in current heavy non-devotion control lists. I think it might see a little bit more play. It feels like the current removal in the game might be put under a little bit of pressure with a few of these more legendaries and these really big finishes we've got. So it might find a home. It does kill a lot of the new legendaries and a lot of the new engines because they are quite high provision and low bodied. And it also does synergize with the Alzur. So it's weak, but it might see more play than we expect.
Yeah, it's got... compared to like Rock Slide, you've got the boost and ally as well as a backup, but obviously you would, in most situations, in most situations you would rather be using it for the damage and killing something.
Yeah, I mean, I can see this being played in Kelly because you have flexible damage and you can boost one of your multiple high provision units and get quite good value from it. But it just seems like I'm not sure if it's better than a Pog Slide or a Heatwave or what those cards are aiming to do. So I wonder whether it will find a place in the following meta to come in this after the expansion.
Cosimo. Right, so again, very interesting card design. Thank you, Hearthstone. It's quite powerful in the right situations, if we're going to be honest with this card. Like, you could play it in Mobilization and flip a John Natalis and a Philippa, and you're definitely going to increase your points on the board. But let's be real, it's a meme. We rated it as a 2 overall. It's just because it is playable, but it's definitely not going to be consistent. I don't think you want to rely on this card for any sort of consistent point output.
it has a flaw that it should be able to reach if you do transform these smaller units, but it's just inconsistent by its very nature, and uh, you hope there isn't really a world where this is run in competitive decks, really.
I could see
Yeah.
it. Well, sorry, Van, you go.
I think like the biggest thing is in comparison to something like Alzur, which is it needs to stick to get its value. This is at least deploy. So you're gonna, if you do get the points, there's no risk, or there's a lot less risk playing this card anyway. It is a neutral, so again, any kind of devotionalist can't run it, which is probably a good thing.
Alzur is actually where I see this card making the most sense, because at least then you can re-roll your Regis.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
that's true. And RNG sure even more.
you're
But
probably
then it
just
comes-
losing at that point.
Yeah, that brings us
Yeah.
back to the meme.
Okay, and then Quen. Good to see Quen back in the game. Big fan. So we rated it as a 3. I think the biggest reason is because it's expensive. A 10 tutor card is fairly expensive. I don't know, maybe 3 is a little on the low side once we see the whole set and how the witches are playing. The shield could potentially be important depending on what you're pulling. But it's just, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much this gets played, I think.
I mean, what I like about it is that at least, you know, if you can get your opponent's heat wave out with something else and you can sort of Geralt Quen into something late, and, you know, they're not going to be able to kill it with damage, they're not going to be able to kill it with a triangle, they're not going to be able to kill it with the pog slide, so it can sort of really guarantee one of those high-end adrenaline finishes from damage. But outside of that, like I said, it's 10 provisions. It's kind of tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's expensive. I mean, one of the big ways we saw this card seeing play is a late call onto Honor Guard. So you're giving the Honor Guard a shield, that's basically a free kill onto the next unit the opponent plays. Again, it's just so expensive, and to play this in Honor Guard in one turn, I think, is that 20 provisions off the top of my head? That's a lot to be spending there.
A lot for essentially
cards.
a on-stays.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be nuts though. Like,
Yeah.
you get a
It
shield and
can.
honor guard that just wins you the game in some places. But yeah, it's 2 for 10. Yeah.
I guess it gives you another place to, like, another way to run, say, Arnagard in Skelliger as well, because, like, currently, like, I think Arnagard can be played anywhere, but he's going to see most playing Battle Trance, isn't he? And it's kind of synergistic in that sort of list.
You'd think so.
Yeah, the opportunity to get the shield on it.
Okay, and the second RNG card of the set, which we have already seen played quite a bit, and even just over the last couple of days by Grevish in the Masters, it's Alzur. So we already saw this card a little bit before the actual official release of this set, just like tomorrow. And we've all played around with it. It's a decent card, but it isn't amazing. It's very high rolly. We've seen people like Fuchsia Briefs, a fellow Team Kreve member, have a lot of fun with it. It can have decent ceilings, but if you hit a Regis, you're sad, and for that reason, it's just too inconsistent, so we gave it a 1.
And we've also now lost Spear Tip from the high roll off a Nero as well, so the ceiling's been kind of dropped on the card a bit.
Dropped quite a bit, like that's a big drop.
I played quite a bit with the card the last few weeks, and the biggest problem I sort of was finding with it, like even in the Kelly list, is that you just don't naturally have that spell support for Alzur that you really want to get those consistent big points out of him, and he really starts to warp your deck. I think Grevish was running as just sort of another red coin abuse option, just so he had some sort of threat that they had to answer, which I can sort of see him working there. But yeah, if you want to win, I don't think you want to build a deck around Alzur. I think you want to have a deck that Alzur can just sort of slot into on the side.
Yeah, Kelly seems like the only deck that it can be played in and not really break the deck, like not make your deck terrible.
I mean, I know Fuchsia, and he has mentioned it to us, that he's been playing this with Lippy, I believe. And you're able to replay those cards that Alzur spawns. So if you do roll a Regis round 1, you can play it again round 3, but yeah, it's just RNG and inconsistent.
It's definitely fun though.
It is fun.
It is fun. And with the Lippy thing, now we have that extra, more drawing of the cards. Maybe there's something there. Back to Lippy playing like good gold cards and then getting to replay them instead of more just replaying Ceres as it is now.
Lippy. Yeah, so that's the end of the neutral set. Now we're on to probably one of the factions I know me and Lemon are definitely excited about.
Yes,
I'm a big monster player.
Yes.
And we've
I don't
got
mind some monsters.
we got some spicy stuff in here. Hybrid. So I originally wasn't sold too much on the card when it first dropped. But seeing Wererat actually made me see that there was a few more synergies with it. Originally we had this card rated as just a dead set 1. I ended up changing my opinion and made its way to a 1.5. It's a 4 provision engine that if there is a consumed deck, it's going to be a threat in that deck. It needs to be answered. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is, this kind of card, isn't it?
Yeah.
Initially, it seems like a worse Neca Warrior, because if it's hard to be getting consumed every turn, because then you're getting a very lopsided sort of deck where you're not running enough Death Wishes and not enough ways to generate points elsewhere. And a Thrive tends to just get the guaranteed point per turn pretty much, especially if you're playing all these tall consume units.
I think that's the biggest thing we came across. Like, it's a 4P engine, but is it really doing more than your other 4P engines that you could play in that point?
Yeah, now that you bring that point up as well, I can really see that. Like, you're playing essentially a conditional engine, whereas like, well, you know, an Idarran Lava or your other Neckers and stuff like that are conditional engines. That's a condition that's a hell of a lot easier to achieve than consuming a unit a turn to get those points.
Yeah.
Still might be playing a super greedy list with like Slizids and Wererats, but I don't know.
Spontaneous Evolution. This is a cool card. I really like the idea of having different effects based on what card you're putting it on, stuff like that, what type of card you're putting it on. We gave it a 3.5. Seems pretty good with Glusty, just for extra drones. So you're kind of playing a 7 if you buff an Insectoid with 3 1s to give the Glusty. That's pretty good. And then on a beast, the buff by 8, it's just as good as an A-Rush with arguably less conditions depending on your deck.
And there is a lot of beasts.
Yeah, exactly. So we think like that's a much easier condition to hit than A-Rush. And A-Rush isn't that hard to hit, really. So the Olgroid ability, we probably don't need to talk about.
I mean, you can turn your Neckers into a couple Idarran Lava.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's your third card in the round, like best case scenario pretty much, and that doesn't seem amazing.
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at it for the spawn 3 drones and 8 boost, isn't it?
Yeah.
And probably
this card in AQ looks interesting.
being an organic, yeah,
It
definitely.
also looks interesting with Wererat as well, which we'll get to eventually.
So, Phooca, probably one of the more underwhelming cards from this set for me. It's pretty much a Neca Warrior, like we compared to the hybrid before, except it has 1 armor and a veil, and it's a provision more expensive. I should probably also mention that your opponent's units can trigger this unit's Thrive, but with a 4 base strength, and you're the one probably playing the bigger units yourself, I don't believe that's going to come into play very much. So you're just left with a more expensive Neca Warrior, and I don't see this getting play much at 5 provisions. And for that reason, I believe we rated this card a 1.5.
I do see this card being relevant if the Salamander Poison Syndicate list sort of becomes dominant. This sort of could be the kind of engine that could really carry you in that sort of game. But outside of that, yeah, it's pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, that's a decent point about Poison. Like, the Veil is nice. I mean, it's a 1.5. We're trying to find ways to play it.
Although,
but, like,
again,
in like, if Poison does become pretty relevant, you have this. You have the Anal Conquerors with Veil for points. It's not terrible, but yeah, I think that it's being expensive. It's probably not worth it.
Yeah, and it is a 4 for 5 Thrive engine, and we have 4 for 4 Thrive engines already in the game. So,
and against a typical list, like, you're probably going to have better units to poison anyways, so
That's a good point.
Succubus. So I kind of really want this card to be good. This is another card that has, again, that interesting card design. It's carryover for monsters, which monsters don't get a lot of. But it's also pretty hard to get use out of. Like, if you're playing this card round 1 as just a 4, it's not really great, is it? We settled on a 1.5 just because it does have some good synergies, especially now with the new location. Like, you could get a 3rd Succubus. And you've got the Wererat, and I did sort of say like maybe we could engine them that way, but unfortunately it comes to a random row. So I think it's really limited in its ability to actually perform what it's in the deck to do.
Yeah, seems pretty underwhelming, really.
And
Don't think it's gonna get much play.
You think of the high ceilings you can get, it's basically ruined for the last 4 turns. But I have like 3 big issues with this card. One, unless you have a Slyzid or a Wererat already set up on the board, you're running consume cards like Barghest and is your last few cards probably. And you don't really want those to be your finishes. And unless you somehow go very deep in round 1 or round 2, but that seems a lot more conditional. The second issue, it's a random row, so even if you have a Slyzid and Wererat on board, there's no guarantee it's going to go into the row that you need it to go to. And third, if you play it with the location, you can't summon 2 at once. So there goes my dreams as soon as I saw that card be revealed.
Chimera. So we gave this one a 3, and really the only list we could see it going into is obviously a swarm list, probably a beast swarm list. It could play for about 10 to 13 tempo, so the ceiling is pretty high with this card, and it does give you an extra space on the row, or an extra space, hopefully on the row, by consuming one of those units. I don't think you'd ever play it in anything outside of a swarm list. Like Barghest is just a better consume in anything else.
I think, this is specifically for Swarm. I think they had a card like Wererat in mind when they designed this, because as we'll get when we get to Wererat, it doesn't generate any points itself, but a card like this Chimera will turn into a payoff for that card. Do you really want to be playing 5 provision cards as finishers in pivotal rounds? That's where I think the biggest issue with this card comes in.
It has a nice ceiling with cards like Plague Maiden or Drones if you're able to really swarm the board hard, in which case, even in an earlier round, because if you can play this like your 6th card in a round 1 or round 2 push or something, you can play as like a 10-point play, which is pretty good. And along with other swarm payoffs, I could see it being very solid in the right list.
Yeah, it being a 5 for 5, like, if it was a 4, you'd be less likely to play it, just because the downside keeps getting worse. But it's starting at a 5, it's not terrible, I don't think.
I guess the other thing as well is how much bronze swarm payoff is there for say a monsters list that isn't Bone Talisman. It's a 5
Nothing
provision
in the
payoff
actual deck itself, really.
Like
It's like Bone Talisman or I think Clear Skies in neutrals or whatever the booster row is. Not much. Like I want this card to be good so we can see more
What
swarm
about
on the list.
So well, I mean that's the thing. We've got some round 1 and round 2 payoffs, so giving monsters the ability to actually get that round length that they want for that swarm.
Yeah,
You spend the first few turns setting up and then you play this.
I think it will be played a bit and tried out a bit in those swarm lists, and probably do okay.
So, on to the Wererat. You've already heard us mention this card a couple of times already here. And this one will be very heavily dependent on synergy, because if you look at what it does, so it's a 5 for 7 by default. At the end of your turn, it will consume a unit onto the right, but you can use its order to reset this unit's power, and for the amount of boosts you lost, you spawn a rat for each point lost. So it pretty much is itself a 5 for 7, but you're able to repeatedly consume and cycle rats. It can help you with getting more swarm onto the board, get you repeated consumes and act as an engine, which with conjunction in cards like Hybrid and Ida, it could be possibly good. But due to that baseline of 5 for 7 and being very, very dependent on synergy, we decided to give this card a 3. It could be viable, but it's a bit hard to tell how well the whole deck will mesh together.
I love this card. Not for any reasons just within the game. Like it's just a great card, isn't it? Like it's a great idea.
It's so cool.
Again, it's great card. The card design so far for this whole set's been really, really awesome. That we've had so many interesting things to talk about. And I mean, look at it.
I want this to be good. I want to be able to use this art.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing is, without any synergies, it's always a 5 for 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of build around this card quite a bit.
You can see this in a penitent list, I guess. In that 7 provision slot, you can either pull it with penitent or you can play penitent beside it. It sort of seems okay. Okay, so next we have Idia. Am I saying that right? Idia?
Something like that.
Don't think anyone knows.
Yeah, we'll just call it Dr. I. So at first glance, this card actually sort of seems really, really strong. But when you start to break it down, it just feels like a more expensive, bigger-bodied, lonely champion. It does engine a little bit, but again, like, you know, we're playing this kind of late. Does the Adrenaline 3 have to be on for it to trigger the consume proc?
No, so the engine effect should trigger all throughout the round.
Because there's a full stop
However,
there.
note that it's not like old AQ, and when you destroy, like, say, consume 10 drones at once, you're not getting 10 drones back. You're only getting 1 drone back.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, yeah, its effect's a little bit underwhelming, I think, for its provision slot.
Yeah.
We settled with a 2.5. There is some good synergies with it and stuff, but yeah, it just doesn't seem. There's cheaper cards that do a job better. Like, if you wanted to engine off your consumes, you just run the hybrid, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, the immunity is nice, but I don't think it's worth it at that point.
The body's decent for 7-8, but yeah, not amazing.
And now the first of our locations.
Yeah, new card type, hype.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I really like the idea. So we gave this one a 3. I think mostly because of the things that it's spawning are maybe a bit underwhelming. Like a Phooca, which we've already talked about, the Chimera or the hybrid. And then you have the Succubus synergy, but like we said, the Succubus doesn't seem that strong. The order ability is pretty nice, I think, for a monsters deck anyway. If you're missing something that, like Spear Tip, Ugern, Goliath, you're getting it on top. And I mean, the
Vi.
drone is at least 2 points. Yeah.
Vi.
Yeah.
I think Vi's
So-
the card they probably had in mind when they
Yeah.
designed this, didn't they?
Yeah, the new cards, yeah.
What was the rating there?
We gave it a 3.
Like, the issue I see with this is a lot of the bronzes, I mean, Succubus, Phooca, they don't seem good. Hybrid and Chimera both need a pretty specialized list, and then yeah, the order. Like, if you want to run it in like a Vi list or something, you need to find a use for some of these bronzes, which I can't really guarantee you're going to have. And yeah, I want this to be good though. It's a cool order.
Yeah, it is cool.
Okay, this is my MVP from the expansion. Koshchey, this card is crazy, absolutely crazy. So if we look at the text, pretty much, it essentially has Thrive 2. So whenever this unit's Thrive is triggered, you spawn a drone on the row, you're getting 2 points for every time this unit thrives. But in the later half of the round, the last 5 cards, whenever this unit's Thrive is triggered, you spawn an Endrega Lava instead of a drone, which means you're getting a Thrive engine every time this Thrive is triggered. If you play this with Caranthir and Ilderan, then you're potentially getting up to 3 Koshcheys throughout the game. You can get an extra proc with the Force of Nature. You could even run like Renew onto Caranthir with the Ilderan still on board to get like 5 Koshcheys. This card is insane. And like, it ramps so much with all this Thrive you can establish on board in such a short amount of time. I could very easily see this deck become like a tier 1 in the expansion. And for that reason, we've rated this card as the first 5 in the set.
Yeah, it's let's be real, it doesn't even need to go into a synergistic list to just overwhelm an opponent's removal. It's super scary. You could play it with a leader like what's the Woodland Spirit leader's called?
Force of Nature.
Force of Nature. You can play it, proc it straight away on Adrenaline 5, Adrenaline 4, and you know, you've got an engine left over as well. So this card's super flexible into any monster list. It's only 10 provisions. It's got a 4 body with a 3 army, means it's 3 armor, means it's a 7. So yeah, this card is scary.
Yeah, it is tough to kill. Does Caranthir proc it when you play it off Caranthir?
Assuming it works like Kiki Queen, yes.
So then it also automatically goes to a 5 instead of a 4, which is just a little bit harder to kill in some circumstances.
And you got an Endrega Lava,
And
so an
you got
extra
the
Thrive
lava.
unit anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really see a downside to this.
Unfortunately, I think the downside is it's the final nail in the coffin for Kiki Queen, isn't it? You just don't need the Kiki Queen anymore.
I mean, it might be played with Kiki, but yeah, this card seems so strong by itself and will swarm like crazy.
Is there a synergy there we're missing with the Idir card we reviewed just before, where you can play this early?
Swarm.
Yeah. Is
Yes.
overswarming a risk with this?
You probably don't want to play it too early because you want to make sure that your thrives are giving you the lava. Like if you get it to a point where it's too tall to thrive, I mean your deck's going to be built around it. But
I guess 5 Koshcheys is going to be a little bit too much, isn't it? You're going to just have
probably play it. Yeah, that's if you can use the current date to have a Koshchey round 1 though, and another for round 3. That's where it's strong, and the opponent might remove some. So that's where the current 3 is necessary. But even if you just have a Koshchey back row, play all your thrives front row, that's crazy points.
Am I the only one that also gets a few shivers up my spine looking at that?
Yeah.
The art in this expansion, as always, is fantastic.
On point. So now we've got Vi. Shuffle Vi back to your deck and increase its base power by 3. We ended up rating the card as a 3 overall. It's got some pretty good synergy. It's got a really, really awesome effect. Like, it looks really, really strong on paper. You know, you just play it, you consume it, you get to keep those 8 points on the board. It goes back to your deck and boosts itself by 3. The only problem I sort of saw with it was it's really going to warp your deck construction, I think. I'm pretty sure Lemon's already planning a Monsters Hyper Thin. So on that, I think it's borderline viable because there is sort of a list that could use it with your Hillock, Whispering Hillock and all that sort of stuff. But the card itself, I think, will just end up being a little bit underwhelming. And if you've built your strategy around it and your opponent heat waves it, you're kind of just dead in the water.
Yeah, you'd like to... Ideally, if you're building around this, you'd like to be able to consume it the turn you play it to avoid that happening. And it is also, you need to try and draw this round 1, right? You don't want to be seeing this for the first time in round 3. Or really round 2, like you lose a lot of points that way. It's not a bad Caranthea Tatterwing combo. But
then you have 2 Vi's, which is kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, it depends how many consumes you're running. Like if you're pulling, 2 14s round 3, if you can manage to do that, obviously. But I like the card. I'm excited to try it out.
It's definitely interesting. Again, that word.
Yeah, I really want to try that card.
Alright, so that's it for monsters. Now we're on to Nilfgaard, which we all think's probably fighting NR for the worst cards in the set.
Yeah. And we're starting with this one. So we gave this a 1.5. Initially, we weren't sure about what was happening with Portal, and it was potentially going to be a bit stronger. But now with the Portal change, it just doesn't seem like the condition is worth it compared to something like a Magni Division, which is playing for the same stat line. And surprisingly, in NG, the 4s are kind of picked. Like what are you going to lose for this? You don't want to be losing a Poison if your deck's based on that. You don't want to be losing an Aristocrat. And if you're playing Tactics, you don't want to be losing Attorney Joust or something like that. And then the other option is just the Magni, which seems like a much safer engine.
And the other question is, how much thinning are you actually doing in Hyperthin if you're how much thinning are you doing in Nilfgaard if you're not playing Hyperthin? You have maybe like 2 thinning you're playing round 1 realistically if you get your Hunting Pack and your Imperial Brigade to stick. But a lot of other decks also do thinning, so you'll be hard pressed to actually get this condition, I think, playing from hand.
I mean, my biggest problem with this card is Magni.
Yeah.
Like
why would you?
Yeah, I mean, Magni's condition does sort of, limit what you can do and how you can interact, and there is going to be some more row movement, so Magni can be turned off a little bit easier. But I think with the amount of thinning that's already in the format, it's going to be hard to keep this card consistently turned on with your opponents consistently thinning. Like, if you play against Scoia'tael and they Justice, like, it just turns it off, and it's, Justice is big enough at 13.
Yeah, and it seems like they kind of had the whole deck manipulation, the new cards of putting stuff back in their deck, stuff like that in mind when they did this. But I honestly, I don't see a reason why it shouldn't start at 4.
I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope.
Me
I hope
too.
we're wrong on these Nilfgaard packages.
But Nilfgaard is a faction that struggles for points right now, and these new cards do not seem to help that huge glaring weakness that Nilfgaard has.
I'd also just like to point out for all the Nilfgaard fanboys that this is the only card in the set that seems to have a child attacking a defenseless goat. So.
Yes. So I think our good friend Flo Mega summarized this card pretty well when he said, "Congratulations, Nilfgaard. You now have the worst 5 damage special removal in the game. I think you can see why. 5 damage is pretty much universally good. It's a tactic, good. Death Blow, banish the unit you just killed, and to put it right back to the top of the opponent's deck. If you just killed an engine, particularly a gold one, which is what this kind of removal usually wants to do, you just gave the opponent their engine you just wanted to kill back. It seems really counterintuitive, and unless you're manipulating the top of the deck to somehow steal that unit back, it just doesn't seem amazing. Yeah, for that reason, we gave it a 1.5 rating.
Yeah, I think I was the one that gave it a 2.
Optimistic.
Yeah, optimistic. I mean, there are small synergies with it, right? With all the new play the top card or do something with the top card of your opponent's deck. I still think it's pretty bad. Like 2 is not a good rating.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem as well is like, you know, say you kill an Anna and they still have AA in hand. Say you kill Harold and they've got Blood Eagle. Most high value targets you want to kill, you don't want to see again. And even a drummer, for example, like, you know, your deck constructions, you've got X amount of removal spells to remove X amount of engines. If they're getting that engine again in round 2 or round 3, it's not really great for you, is it?
Yeah, if you kill a Herald and Skellige retutors that Herald back with the Blood Eagle, we're going back to second win meta, and we do not want that. So even more reason this card is bad.
You just
And
don't win.
it's not spawn a base copy, so I think you would get the round 3 Herald as well.
You definitely would, because if you leader round 3, you get that version of Harold. So I would
Even then, I think the base copy of Harold round 3 is actually just Harold round 3 because it's a completely separate card to the round 1 version.
Interesting. Yeah.
Next we have Vypper Witcher. Put Bleeding 2 on an enemy unit on deploy. Adrenaline 6. Spawn a copy of that unit at the top of your opponent's deck. So the card starts out life as a 6 for 5, which is pretty underwhelming in the current, power creep of the cards. The baseline is sort of a 6 for 4. You really want a 7 for 5 most of the time. Does an engine, doesn't really do anything. It cucks your opponent's draws a little bit, but is it really, really worth it at the end of the day? I don't think so.
Biggest problem is, I mean, it's in Nilfgaard, so you don't want to be playing 6 for 5s. You already, you have Tortoises as probably one of the best cards to play in Nilfgaard 5 slot, and it's just a 7 for 5, and it's still not amazing.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So it can pose the problem.
The only way I see these kind of cards being good is if you can completely brick what the opponent does. So completely brick their mulligans. You manage to put a bunch of volunteers, say against NR at the top of the deck, maybe kill, I don't know, another Royal Guard with coded weapons, but it seems really tough to properly brick all their cards, and then you just played very bad tempo, and you'll probably lose the round as well.
Yeah, again, small synergy with, if you want the card on top, it's just giving something bleeding, so if you can give a good card bleeding, but
it gets that Counterella synergy and stuff like that going, obviously, but again, it just
you only have so many Counterellas with all these cards.
Yeah. Vypper Witcher Alchemist. This one got a 2, so that's doing better. It requires a lot of setup to be good, though, and I don't think you want to be running the cards that you need to just for this interaction, and because it needs all that setup, you're playing slow. It's just another kind of underwhelming deck manipulation card, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
5 for 5. It's worse than a 6 for 5.
Yeah, it's just.
And if it was 6 for 5, is it even worth it? Probably not.
You're going to hear us say this a bit about these Nilfgaard bronzes.
Yeah.
No points.
Feels bad.
Although speaking of points, this is like the linchpin for Nilfgaard in this set. In terms of the bronzes at least, and this needs to be able to make up your points. So you manage to basically buff itself by the provision of cards in the opponent's deck. Now normally it's just the top card, which can hit maybe a 4P card and plays a 5 for 6, absolutely terrible. Hit a bowl, you play 16 for 6, and that's crazy good. And at the last 3 cards of the round, this card will automatically set its cost to the highest card in the opponent's deck still. But note that if the opponent has drawn their highest cost card, this card will get less and less value as the game goes on. You can use this if you've managed to set up the opponent's top deck in such a way that it's a high provision gold, but then you need to be able to take that from the top of their deck. as well, and so that they don't end up redrawing that gold. And yeah, it just seems really inconsistent and hard to set up properly with not an amazing payoff.
You see some synergy with the Vypper Witcher, but
Yeah.
the problem is, you really want to be leveraging these 5 and 6 bronzes to win round 1. How many hypervision cards are coming down round 1 for you to sort of get that off with? So then, you're looking at the Warritt and stuff like that. And again, it's definitely got a better ceiling than most of the other Nilfgaard bronzes we've seen. But starting out life as a 1 and requiring help, it definitely needs to punch above its weight to be considered viable, I think.
Yeah, and that's like the best case scenario for this card seems to be late in round 1. And outside of that, like in a short round 3 or in a round 3, yeah, exactly. That's the biggest problem. And in a round 3, it's probably not hitting things that are that good. Like maybe in a few games it will if they've missed against maybe NR that has to draw their cards, but everything else is really tutoring stuff.
Well, that's a really good point, isn't it? Like if you're playing this at the end of round 3 trying to catch a hypervision card that your opponent's missed, there's a good chance you're probably winning the game anyway if you found your card, so it's kind of irrelevant at that point.
Yeah, I guess the deck I can see it being good against is Lippy.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting line. Some Lippy tech. Maybe it's a tournament tech for Lippy.
Yeah, but aside from that,
somewhere.
You're probably not being able to hold this until the end of round 1. You probably have to play it at some point and just hope.
If you're caught in a short round against Lippy, though, with this as your big point play, are you winning it, though?
No.
Probably not. So
hopefully you've yoinked the Ceres.
No.
It's the same old problem with NG bronzes, isn't it? They can't actually win any rounds.
I think that's enough about that card.
Warritt the All-Seeing. So you've heard us mention him a couple times because he does synergize with these other things. Deploy melee, put the highest cost card in your opponent's deck on top of it. The lowest cost card in your opponent's deck on the top of it if you deploy range row. We ended up giving this card a 2.5. It does have some synergies. It does do some things with the new packages. It works with your Canarellas and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, it feels a little bit lackluster. Like, where are you getting your points from with this deck? With this card?
Or this deck. It feels like there's a lot of setup cards, or not a lot of payoff cards.
Again, you can put the highest cost cards to the top of the opponent's deck. Like, this is the big combo that I can see this kind of list having. You put the highest cost cards to the top of the deck. You play your Vypper Witcher Mentor to boost by that card's provisions. That's good. You play Cantarella or a Vypper Witcher Alchemist to steal that card. That's cool. And that can have a high ceiling, but you need to have access to that war early on, and outside of that combo, like, I don't see where the other cards will be finding value, and that's why they have a lower value overall. Like, together they can be insane, but outside of this, like, one combo, which you can only really pull off once,
and let's be real, like, if you want to deploy melee row to get that combo with the Vypper Witcher and that, you also need some way to interact with the top of your opponent's deck and get that card. Otherwise, you've just fixed their draws for round 2 or 3.
Yeah, you need a three card combo in hand.
That's pretty scary. Like, if you think about it, if this card's in your hand, and you don't have that interaction, and you're like, well, we'll just put the lowest card in the top of your opponent's deck. Like, that could still be a decent card. You know what I mean? Like, if you're up against, say, like a hyper thin list, that's still going to be a big power play that they're probably going to want to draw, and there's all sorts of things going on there.
Yeah, and it's a 7 for 8. Like,
it isn't terrible.
I mean, the ceiling on it is you're basically hitting a Neuromancy or a Ball or a Haunt or something like that at 14, 15 provisions, and you play the Vypper Witcher and it boosts by that much. But how often is that actually going to happen?
Yeah, that seems to be the biggest problem with all this deck manipulation stuff. You need too many cards in hand for the points that you want out of it. Otherwise, if they're all over the place, they're not really getting any value by themselves.
And I just want to quickly mention the range you might think is a decent backup, but like, considering a card like Cynthia doesn't see play, which is a 6 for 7, and you spawn a 3 power do nothing at the top of the opponent's deck, like, you just gave them a card that will probably play for 6 points anyways, because they're unlikely to be playing Nilfgaard bronzes like you are. And it's just not amazing.
And you don't want to be playing an 8p card on a dry pass.
Yeah, as opposed to Warritt the All-Seeing, it's Warritt the All setting everything up and doing nothing, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I love Hyperthin, and this card seems to work well with Hyperthin. So if you can thin your deck to not many cards, and the opponent still has a decent number of cards in their deck, you play Kolgrim as your third last card, and because of the Adrenaline 2 and the way deploy works, he will boost himself by the difference between the cards in the 2 players deck 3 times. So say you have a difference of 5 cards in the 2 decks, this guy will play for 16 points. 16 for 9 is pretty good and can act as a very nice finisher. And for that reason, we've given him a 3.5, which is as good as you're getting from Nilfgaard this expansion, according to our ratings.
That number was definitely thrown out by Lemon's 5 as well.
No, I gave it a 4.
If you can't tell, Lemon's been theory crafting Kolgrim for a very, very long time now.
Yeah, this card was revealed at the very start of the reveal season. I think it looks cool. I love me some Hyperthin. I think even in a regular deck, if you can just get a even 3 card difference between the 2 decks, this card still plays for 10 for 9. Not terrible.
I mean, he's a good finisher for Nilfgaard, which doesn't really have many outside of Ball and aristocrats and usurpers and stuff. So it is, this is really good card design. I think this is super interesting.
It's cool design. The problem is it also has to live to get its value.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you're just playing it, like Lemon said, you can play it in a regular deck. Like, there's probably going to be a difference in cards. The good thing is it doesn't have to be like your opponent has to have more cards. It can just be however the game's worked out. Ideally, you do want to be hitting maybe a 5-card difference at least. But yeah, it does have to live. So it's not just like a 1-turn point slam last say, which is a little bit scary.
If you have a 5-card difference, it'll go to 6 on the turn it's played, which is relatively hard to remove.
Yeah,
it does just die to Toll Punish.
Yeah.
How hard is it to establish a 5-card difference given the current state of the
We'll have
thinning
to see. It
tools
really
to
depends on the other
do a lot
lists
of
in the
other
meta
decks?
and how much they're thinning compared to how much you're thinning. Because
Again,
you could also,
it's very good against Lippy.
yeah, you could try and take a decision to not thin at all if the other decks in the meta are thinning, and then you just have a nice Kolgrim when you've done nothing to set it up, depending on the deck the opponent plays. But yeah, I want it to be good.
It's going to play for a lot of points against Limpy. Like 30 points.
Is you again, is it Van? Gorthur Gvaed? Gvaed? How were we saying this one?
Something like that.
I'm calling it the Nilfgaard location.
Slytherin Castle?
Yeah, so I think the problem with this is it plays a Nilfgaard bronze, and we've been talking about these Nilfgaard bronzes as not being very good. And for that reason, mainly, I think we've given this one a 1, which is a bit sad because it's I like these location cards.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a really cool idea. And again, the order, move a unit from your opponent's graveyard to the top of their deck. It's a little strange.
They seem to be trying to give Nilfgaard some tools to deal with Skellige's graveyard a little bit, maybe.
Seems weird.
I don't see many other places where you're really wanting to interact with your opponent's graveyard in such a way, are you? Like, you do want to exile the odd Gurn or something like that, but not this.
This one looks like the other cards we've been looking at, maybe you want to put something good on top to take it. This one looks like you want to be giving them back a brick.
Yeah, you just give them a... you can use it to set up a Vypper Witcher Mentor in like around 3 or something.
Yeah,
assuming
round
you
3, that's true. Round 3 it is a bit different, but you never want to be putting unless you're using the card. Again, it's just a lot of setup.
Yeah, and it can backfire if the opponent just tutors the high provision card to put it top of the deck.
Maybe Matter will be played again.
Yeah, I don't know. But,
maybe that's not good enough for Matter.
These locations are about as good as the bronzes, and for a faction that seems to have bad bronzes this expansion, this location seems equally bad.
Yeah.
Again, please, someone prove us wrong.
I want to be wrong.
Vypper. Honestly, guys, I got nothing on this card. We've given it a 1.5. Again, I think Van was being generous because it's got delicious art.
I'm hopeful for this.
At the end of the round, put this card in the opponent's graveyard. At the end of your turn, Walling graveyard, banish the lowest cost card from it. If Vypper is the only card in your graveyard, give it Doomed and then summon it to your opponent's. The biggest issue I see with this card is basically that, again, Tortoise exists. Why would you run 7 for 9s that have a little bit of, maybe a little bit of carryover? They might get lucky and, eat a War of Clans target or something like that. But the reality of it is the matchup where it's going to find the most value is Skellige, and if it's going to actually cuck them, they're just going to Hjalmar it out and kill something of yours. So I just think it's not really what you want to be doing.
This this card backfires hard if your opponent kills it in like round 1 where you'd play this on your side of the board because it will start eating your graveyard and go back to their side if they get the kill. And there's really not enough graveyard hate to be able to support this card properly. The location helps with 1 card, but it seems hard to get this to return to your side of the board.
I mean,
Yeah,
you could
to
put
be
it on top of
fair-
your opponent's deck if you wanted.
Yeah. To be fair, the 7 and 2 armor is pretty hard to kill without banishing, like a heat wave or something.
Yes, that is true at
Does
least.
die to triangle.
It does die to triangle. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
It also gets boosted by 9 from triangle.
Yeah,
So
a lot of the cards in the set do die to triangle. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're not playing this unless you've got ways to try and get it back on your side.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
like you're running like a Xavier Lemons or something, and then you're sort of
and
just
you're-
running bad
and that
cards
just
to
seems
make
like you're
bad cards
crossing
good.
into memory too hard.
Yeah, and the problem, like Beef said, against SK, it's a really nice Hjalmar, and then you've just
Yeah.
that's not good.
And the reality of it is this is where you would actually want this card, isn't it? Against SK to try and snipe the Warrior Clans targets, try and snipe the
it's more
Raiders.
helpful with SK.
But it never does what you want it to do.
It's
Also, did we mention it's a 7 for 9 in a faction that needs points?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's what. Well, I guess we sort of did with the tortoise comment, didn't we? Like, why play?
Yeah, like
why play
it's just
7 for
not
nines?
one in a hypervision card in a round
Yeah.
1
If
or
you
anything.
don't get any extra value, it is a tortoise, and you've just lost 4 provisions.
Mhm. And it's a bad Ramon target.
Mhm.
Yeah, no soldier synergy. Yeah. This card though, so this one seems like one of the better Nilfgaard cards in the set. We ended up giving it a 3.5. I could see that being higher once it gets going. So it needs to hit a 7 to play for a 10 for 10. It can be played around to a point. It depends how the decks are playing. If there's high units everywhere, then it's going to be getting its value. I think it's pretty balanced with the Adrenaline 2 condition. I think this is a well-designed card because
Definitely.
it can't just hit you can't just use it as a last say. But I think it will be seeing a lot of play, especially if there's NG Witcher decks running around. This is just another Witcher that you probably want to be playing.
Outside of that, I don't really see. Like, it's just good reach, isn't it? Which is definitely something that Nilfgaard's struggling with, especially on blue. Like, this is going to give them an ability to sort of win against, say, like monsters on blue and even Skellige on blue. They're going to have some pretty high-powered units coming down round 1 now.
Yeah, it doubles down on Nilfgaard being good against tall targets with things like Vincent, Yenvo, poisons. And it can, like the swap means you're basically gaining double the points of that unit you would have just killed otherwise. But
So it's definitely some Nilfgaard point slam. It's just as it probably should be in Nilfgaard, very conditional.
and it can hard brick as well in some matchups.
Yeah, and if it's everywhere, people are going to be playing around it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this card. It's like it's Nilfgaard's Twervy, isn't it?
Pretty much.
That's it for Nilfgaard. Now we're on to, well, definitely competing for the most underwhelming bronze packages.
From bad to bad.
Yeah.
Slightly better.
Slightly better. At least it's blue. At least it's Northern Realms and not Filthguard.
I mean, this set might make you feel a bit blue for the Northern Realms as well. And to start off, we have Target Practice, which we've rated 1.5. I think Van was a little bit higher on this
that sounds
card than
like-
the rest of us.
Sounds like me chucking a 2 in there.
3, actually. So this card, if you target a Witcher, you get this to play as a 6 for 4, which is basically just any other NR bronze. You have Warfare and Resupply synergy, which I don't think Witchers will have great synergy with. And this card isn't swarmy enough to be good in Swarm. You can combine it with the Griffin Witcher Adept to make both bronzes 6s for 4, but like, why would you do that when you can just play bronzes that are 6s for 4 by themselves?
I just don't understand where they're going with this card, with Warfare in general. Like, we have this archetype that's resupplied that just seems to get really no support, and then something like this, which has the Warfare tag on it, but is reality a Witcher synergistic card. It just seems a bit all over the place, this one.
Yeah, I think the main reason I gave it a 3 at Viable is because there are some decks that run the Mad Charge, and I think if you are playing any Witches or stuff like that, this seems like a better alternative. If you go back up for Natalis.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I think the best way to play the Talis is just to be talented, right, and have oil and AA in the
Most
deck.
people just run oil AA and
Still scares me.
don't
I mean, I
this.
do, but it still scares me.
I
I
mean,
think once, like, if Shield Wall got changed, maybe that's not what would be happening.
Maybe.
Griffin Witcher Adept. Transform an allied Witcher into a base copy of a Griffin Witcher. It's an order. It's basically just ethereal, but a little bit worse. Can only transform other witches. We gave it a 1.5 again. I just can't see how this card actually impacts the board state when it's played. You need a lot of moving parts to get this thing going, and you're probably better off just playing another 4 provision card that doesn't need other things on the board, if you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, I mean,
like a Marine, for example.
you're probably only playing this in a Shield list.
It might have a place to go if you've got if Witcher Swarm is a thing, and I guess like you're saying you can sort of swarm and use the what are they called, it got changed recently, the Northern Realms women that take the shield and boost by 2.
Yeah,
The damn sorceress.
Yes, the sorceresses. So you can see
But you
some
need enough
synergy there.
charges for them.
Exactly. So
But you can set up a chain between 2 Griffin Witcher Adepts. You remove the shield from one, you transform the other one into the standard Griffin with the order refreshed. Keep getting shields off and off, but
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's pretty niche and probably not that good.
it's like what you're spending 3 bronzes pretty much, an adept, R2's Adept, a Griffin Witcher Adept, and the damn sorceress to get like 2 points per turn.
when you can
Well,
just
you are-
play.
I mean, it gives you 2 shields, right? If you're playing Rognar,
Yeah.
it's giving you, it's 4 plus 6 on Rognar.
So there is an
Robbie.
archetype there for it. It's just that the archetype itself currently isn't seeing play, and is this enough to push it over the line?
No, I
doubt it.
don't think so. The nice thing is you can play for like a 6 for 4, right, on a student.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's
6
also
2 shields. It's not terrible, but
it's also hard to remove as well because it has a shield. So if Witcher Swarm is a thing, then this card is a pretty serious payoff for it. If we're going to be serious, it's hard to kill. You can just keep flipping and flipping and flipping.
yeah. So if one of the witches gets hit to a 1, it plays for 7. It gets a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if it gets played. And the Griffin Witcher Ranger.
We must apologise for the quality on this picture. This is the only one we could get our hands on.
So we've given it a 2. I think the nice thing about this is the potential reach in maybe a long round 1, with a lot of decks naturally stacking. And there seems to be a fair bit of Swarm coming as well, so some more value there. The order ability, I mean, there is a card that I think it's designed for that's maybe not very good, but it's not bad to protect an engine. Maybe you put it on Prince if you're playing that, but Shield Wall's just better at that point, so not sure.
Yeah, it's a little bit kind of like clunky. Like, it's going to be good against like Scoia'tael, who's going to be row stacking a lot. It's really good in the mirror. It's really good against opposing boats and stuff like that. It really sort of turns the boat into essentially a 1 point a turn engine.
Yeah.
When this thing comes down late, I don't see the order said being very relevant anywhere. Like, you could put it on an Arch Griffin, but this is also going to leave the turn and do all those sorts of things as well. So yeah, I guess we'll really see with this one, won't we?
Yeah,
Maybe
I guess
you run this as a one-off, like an AA target if in a long round 1. The issue is this hard bricks in a short round 3.
it does. I guess there's also Siege. It's a nice card in Siege because they're going to row stack front.
Yeah, that's
maybe,
a good point.
but
Yeah.
I think we're trying to find some places for it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's terrible though. Like,
It's
if you
not
do have
terrible.
it in round 1, a long round 1, it can play for a decent amount of points.
Just so you guys know, we spoke for about 5 hours the other night. 3 of them were probably on Nilfgaard and NR trying to find some way to actually play these cards, and it was hard.
But watch us be wrong completely and these cards be good.
Please, again, please.
Yeah. So we think this is probably the best NR bronze from the expansion, and particularly finding its place in Control Revenant decks. It's a bit of an alternative to the Danian Archers being played onto the melee row, I believe. Yep. And instead of being charge based and getting charges with armor, it's just a cooldown of 1. And when you have Adrenaline 3 triggered, it will lock itself and damage your random enemy by 3, playing for a 7 for 5 towards the end of the round and giving you consistent damage output throughout the round. And this just fits into what the Rev control deck is trying to do.
Yeah.
Even NR has 7 for 5s, Nilfgaard.
This seems cool. I like this card.
Yeah.
It's
Does it-
nice. Oh, sorry, you go.
Does it see play ever over archers?
I think you want to play both of them.
Just play it
You,
as like
you
a
need
1
archers
or
for
another
soldiers because mobilization.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
the
You can't leave it-
question is whether you can fit this on
'cause-
top of others.
one. Yeah, and like the other
But
problem
you
I
can
see with
dolly
this
it.
is archers store their charges, whereas this you do have to use it every turn.
Yeah, that's the other thing, being cooldown based.
But it does kind of, in a Revenant deck, it does kind of demand an answer.
hmm
You play this round 1, and it sticks. That goes a long way to winning you the round.
Mm.
Without using an archer, and then you've got a Dahlia potentially leader for those archers.
You don't feel good killing this either if you know your opponent's got revs and archers coming, do you?
Yeah,
Yeah, It
exactly.
just puts more stress on removal.
It's good.
Also,
Removal bait.
yeah, minor aside, if you can put Veil on it, it will continually boost by 3 because it doesn't lock itself, which
Damage
is funny.
enemy by
But
3, yeah.
it's unless you're running like Marlene in the neutrals, I don't think you're doing that really.
And you know, round 1 Crystal Skull and stuff like that too is potential
That's
there.
actually a thing, to be fair as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty good Crystal Skull.
That's
card.
actually
Pretty good round 1
Eight.
engine.
not bad.
Yeah.
Then it closes out the round pretty nastily as well.
Yeah.
Imagine running Crystal Skull over there and Strategy. Wow.
Griffin Witcher Mentor. Draw the top unit, then shuffle a card back to your deck. Adrenaline 4. Boost the unit you've drawn by 2. We had it as a 2.5. It's another pretty underwhelming NR bronze. I can definitely see it getting played though. NR has a draw your gold problem. This does sort of help it. And you do also get some hand buff and stuff like that on too, so there is a little bit of carry over it. But ultimately, for what it does at 5 provisions, which is generally a slot that's taken up by a lot of engines in our list, I don't really see it getting played over other things like, the Griffin Witcher or archers and the such.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. The 5 slot, you've got a lot of good engines in NR that you don't want to be replacing this with, I don't think. Okay, Coen. So, personally, I don't think this card is going to be very good. I think it's going to be too hard to set up. And sure, if you get a big payoff, it might win you the game. But I think you're going to lose more games than you'll win because of this card. The fact that it also boosts every unit, so it boosts your opponent's side, makes it a lot harder to find really good value. It is only a 7p, so it doesn't have to find you 20 points, but it's a kind of card you need to build around a little bit. And
It's also,
I think if you're
you go.
I think if you're buffing 4s, it's not worth it. So you want to be buffing 5s.
Yeah, if it's like, it's so hard to make it happen, right? Like, this is just a brick waiting to happen every time you play it. And again, it's that kind of win more card, isn't it? If you've got a heap of Swarm established and you've got 5s all over the board for Coen to buff, are you ever losing that game anyway?
Yeah, like if ISO sticks, which is probably the card you need to stick to make this work, then
You probably win, and you can double up boost anyways on a Trident.
yeah, exactly. It's got just great targets anyway.
So,
Minor note, it does come off as a 5 when you play it from AA, and if you have commandos boosted with the Voimir, it boosts all those commandos by 2.
Yeah,
That's just the
Red-
best use. And
Interaction, yeah.
read my
alright.
mind there. It's a payoff for like triple commandos and stuff like that,
Yeah.
for sure. But
not in triple though, because then you're spending an AA charge for this, and you can't really afford to do that most of the time.
I mean, let's be real, triple isn't a deck, it's only doubles.
Yeah.
We gave that a 1.5 in the end.
So Keldar, which we rated it a 1. It's expensive at 9 provisions. It has 4 base power with 1 armor, similar to Von Hurst. It feels a very similar role. However, resupply isn't commonly triggered with Warfares, as we mentioned before. And then the Adrenaline 4, okay, it triggers automatically, but it's very low base power. You have to play this towards the end of the round, which isn't when you want to be playing these relatively slow engines.
Mm.
And if you want to use a TA on it, which is the role that Von Hurst fills, well, it doesn't trigger its adrenaline until 5 cards into the round, which
Better have some resupply cards.
Well, again, like
Which
I
is-
think this is a common thing we're saying with NR, isn't it? That there's just cards that already do the things these cards are doing, but they do them better.
like, why would you play this over Frigate? Like, it
Yeah.
spawns witches, okay, but like, why?
The Witcher payoff doesn't really seem worth it, does it, so far from
No.
what we've seen in terms of, you know, if you can actually swarm the board. This is the only card that will have efficiently swarm the board as well.
Yeah.
For witches.
For witches, yeah. Like you've got the Bear
doesn't even
Mentor
seem great.
in SK, but this thing's like this is the one that's meant to swarm, but it's a 9 provision gold, which means if it's answered, the rest of your strategy's out the window as well. So it's a high risk, low reward card, I think.
Yeah. And how many provisions is Von Hurst?
8.
From
So
my memory.
less. And that Syndicate Swarm has a lot more payoffs than NR Witcher Swarm does.
Yeah, and you don't even play it in the actual swarm list, which is the funny
No,
thing.
exactly. Yeah. And like you played in engine list, and Von Hurst just triggers because you always have the coins for it when you first play it with the leader.
Yeah, this is a bit of a miss. Again, hopefully we're wrong. If I'm losing to Witcher Swarm next week, I'll come back on YouTube and I'll eat all my words in front of you.
Then we play Lambert. Yay.
So here we have Kaer Seren, the NR location. A little bit underwhelming for us at all. The same problem with the Nilfgaard location was just that the bronzes that it deploys aren't really, you know, high quality. Yeah, you can get some engines or you can get some more Witcher Swarm synergy, but really it's a little bit underwhelming, and it's not going to contribute much to the board state. Order booster unit in your deck by 3. You're going to see some synergies with the 12 provision NR card, whose name I still can't remember.
Erland.
And outside of that, I don't really see it being that good. Although there is synergies there with Koen again, but again, how good's Koen going to be?
And our bronzes are bad, therefore the location is bad. That's the way we see it.
Yeah, like they're a bit better than NG. Like getting a Griffin Witcher or in the right situation a Ranger, maybe not terrible, but I don't think you want to be playing this in your deck at 8p just for that and the order.
You'd rather just play that bronze card itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
For
order
3 less provisions.
At least it's carryover as well, which NR is severely missing. But yeah, I don't think that's a positive enough for me to ever run this card.
No.
the Archer.
Oh, Jesus.
So this is the interesting card, I think. I kind of like the idea. Like I really like the idea actually, but it just seems there's way too many ways to answer this. And it's 10p, and if it gets answered by dying in any way, getting reset in any way, even damage, just hitting it down a bit makes it pretty bad. Like, if this goes back into your deck as a 5, you're just drawing another 5 that you have to try and boost again.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah. I don't know. We gave this a 1.
It's a great idea. Again, another way to give NR carryover, which is severely lacking, but it's just such a high-risk strategy, isn't it? Pouring all your points on an Arch, give Griffin for carryover. Like, sure, maybe you don't put that many into it, but again, like you said, Van, it essentially just plays for a 5 as itself. When do you get to play this card effectively? You know, if it's round 1 on blue, like it's pretty slow for a 10 provision card. Like you play this and they sort of match it with another 10 provision card that, I don't know, hits the board for 10 or 12 points. Like, are you ever winning that round now? I don't think so.
Yeah, I suppose you can maybe pin some maneuver round 1 onto Arch Griffin. Play it on board, boost it, so you can double dip on the leader ability if you play another tutor like a Nearmancy to get the Griffin back later. Again, you just lose the game to a toll removal in round 1 pretty much, because there goes your entire game plan and your leader at that point.
You leader this round 1, and then it dies.
I mean, it does have good synergy with Erland as well, right?
Yeah, that's the big
Yeah.
energy. It just seems very risky and very expensive
Yeah,
when you
and like
combo
if
those cards.
the toll punish on this, like, not only answers the card itself in the round you're in, but answers the future potential of this card, which is not what you want.
And like you said before, Van, how good do you feel if you play Arch Griffin, boost it up, and then your opponent plays their 10 provision Baron and goes, see you later? Just doesn't even kill it and then actually puts it back in your deck.
Yeah. And you have to replace something decent here. It's 10p.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cheap. Speaking of not cheap, 12 provisions in NR is Erland of Larvik. So you can boost all the units in your deck by 1, and you can use your order to remove the boost from all these units and boost himself by all your deck buffs. However, we rated it at 2.5, which is decent but not amazing. So this card can be used as red coin abuse, similar to Olgod in the Scoia'tael precision strike lists going around. However, the thing to note is that you're really only drawing maybe 6-7 units at most. So you're only getting about 6 or 7 points of carryover spread across all those cards, which isn't amazing when you're playing a 4 for 12 in round 1. The other thing is that these boosts, I suppose, can get extra value on something like an Ansace or triggering Inspired on your other cards. But again, like, it's 2 provisions more expensive than Olgod. The boosts are less concentrated. And it just seems like really overcosted. The order seems to lack utility. Use it in a round 1, you lose all the boosts and carryover. Use it in a round 3, well then the deploy's not getting as much value. It just seems very counter-synergistic.
Yep, and very expensive.
Yeah.
It's reminiscent of in beta there was a card that did pretty much this order ability, but you could also there was no provision system, so you could also play 40 cards in your deck. So you would actually get a lot of buffs from that. Whereas this one, yeah, it doesn't quite have that power, and I think just how expensive it is.
I mean,
Try running a 40 card deck and then actually drawing this.
No, you're not running more cards to play this card.
carryover is very real as well. Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's hard to underestimate the strength of the carryover, but is NR ever really a red coin abuse deck in that way, where it just wants to play slow and then defend a bleed? I don't really think so.
No, the carryover is good in NR because you're putting it on engines. So like, the value you're getting is nice, but the tempo for the provisions is not. And do you really want to be playing it round 1? Like, with the order ability, maybe that's what you're building your deck around.
Yeah.
So you want to be getting that adrenaline 3, round 3 big points immune, but yeah.
That's it. On to Scoia'tael.
Ooh, yeah.
So originally, our scale went from 1 to 5. We decided it was only fair to include a 0 for this card, making a dud. Move an enemy unit to the other row and give it bleeding 4. If it's the only unit on that row, damage it by 4 instead. It just really doesn't do anything that other cards in Scoia'tael just do better. I don't think there's really much else to say than that.
No, it's bad. Move
It's
on.
not even a nature card.
It's just
No, we shouldn't even talk about it. I don't think there's any world in which this current form is good.
the art's kind of okay.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at, trying to get some positives. I feel like making it.
At least it's not 5 provisions.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of this card, like its ability, the bleeding with the amount of units on the row, or vitality with the amount of units on the row, you're probably wanting to play this fairly early to get kind of medium value on that bleed, 3 or 4. So you have the Dryad that already gives you 3 vitality and it's 4 strength. So it's playing
Grovekeeper.
Yeah, that's also 4p. I think the most significant part is it's a Witcher. So if Harmony comes back, you're at least got a cheap Witcher that you can play at 4p, and you don't mind playing this sort of ability. It's like a Panther ability.
I don't really have much to say on the card. It sort of is what it is, isn't it? It's just
I don't think it's good.
It's
yeah.
I mean, it's
we gave it 2, I should have mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it's a solid enough bronze, but there's just going to be better bronzes in those slots that sort of get those points instantly, isn't there?
Yeah. I don't see it ever being played outside of Harmony.
Okay, so Cat Witcher Mentor. This card is pretty similar to the current Mahakam Guard, except it's not restricted by having to have dwarves on board. In return, it has less power and it's also more expensive at 5 provisions. So this card can quite easily reach like 8 for 5 provisions. If there's 8 units on the row already and you play this card onto that pretty full row, you end up getting probably a 13 for 5 if this card doesn't count itself. And that adrenaline effect can come into play in the last half of the round, and with movement it can get value potentially. And depending on like sequencing, if you can manage to move this to the other row, full up with like a gate, and you can double dip on all these points, and with the deploy, it shouldn't be removed that easily. So I think this card actually has quite a bit of potential personally, and overall we rated this card at a 3.
We're seeing a lot of round finishes in that 5 provision slot, aren't we? I think they're
Yes.
trying to, limit the need to use golds in round 1 as much, maybe, to get that reach and secure your round control. And I think like this card's going to do that role pretty well.
Yeah. And I do think the movement synergy with all the kind of push in the movement archetype, it's probably going to be better than it looks.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that. Move an enemy unit to the leftmost position on its row, damage it by 1 for every card it passed. Its ability is nice, like it's got some really good point. Like if you're going to be playing it for reach at the end of a round, again, that 5 provision card, bronze, playing it for reach, it is going to find some really nice value. I think it's going to play above its provision cost. However, like if you need to use it to say remove an engine, it's really inflexible, I think, in that sort of respect. Like people are really going to be able to position their value cards in such a way where Witcher Saboteur is not going to be able to find that removal value as such.
Yeah, everything that like a frigate spawns to the right.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get to move that a lot. I think it's a good point you make. Like it shouldn't be hard to find decent value for a 5p card, but the removal aspect of it isn't as flexible, and it is easily played around in most situations.
I don't think you're playing both Witcher Saboteur on the last card. I think you're playing one or the other for reach, and then you're probably wanting to have rebukes in that 5 provision slot. Other than that, you know what I mean? I don't think you're ever running both of these cards. We gave it a 2.5, by the way.
I think, and the more you see play from this Scoia'tael set, the more people will play the valuable cards to the left of the row. You can try and set this up with a Guerrilla Tactics offensive charge or a Malena on board, but you have to have that set up already, or be running that specific leader, and you only have so many charges on Guerrilla Tactics as well.
Yeah, and that's hard because it means there also needs to be a decent amount of points, a decent amount of cards on both rows.
Yeah.
The Cat Witcher, though, this looks like one of the better
Best bronze engines.
Yeah. Best Witcher bronze for ST. We gave it a 3.5, and it just seems to be a nice engine that you can play early and keep seeing more value later. It synergizes well with all these movement cards and the movement cards that are already in the game, really, which we'll probably see a bit more play now that the archetype's getting buffed. It plays at least for a 5 for 5, and then it starts engineering. So yeah, it seems pretty good.
I think like this Scoia'tael list is going to be very engine overload as well. So even though it comes down at 4 power and it's like vulnerable to pretty much every removal spell in the game, I don't think you care. I don't think you care if this dies in particular, because you're just going to be able to slap another engine that's doing a similar sort of thing, and you're just going to keep ticking.
I believe it's a Dol Dhu Lokke Sentry off the top of my head. That's the card that if you put it on your ranged row, it'll boost every unit of yours that moves by 1 every time it moves. So you can easily double up on the engine potential of this and make it a bit harder to remove if that original engine sticks, and really just overload the opponent.
And I think
it's also you go.
Go.
It's also nice that you play a 4 and one of your points actually is on your opponent's side of the board in the form of damage. So if they play a 5p or a 5 damage spell to kill it, you still trade that 1 point in that.
I will personally take damage engines over boost engines any day of the week, just because of that factor alone. It's a lot harder for your opponent to get those points back as opposed to when you're boosting.
In that trade, if you have engines ticking already, those will keep ticking, and your opponent will just probably not have as many engines. So yeah, I think it's a very solid card.
I do see with this card, and it's essentially the same problem I see with the whole Scoia'tael list, is you're much more susceptible to your opponent's play than you are, say, another tile. Like your opponent can really, really play around your engines and your cards and really start to devalue you quite a bit.
This list looks so interesting to me. Okay, a Gaetan. So this card seems really solid, I reckon. It acts as one of those typical cards. You manage to get a point for every other unit on the row. And in this case, it's coming from random damage to the enemy, which is alright. It can break on armor and shields, but you should convert most of that into points. The extra synergy, the extra synergy is where it comes in crazy. If you've managed to get the Cat Witcher Mentor to stick, then you'll be getting an extra point for every unit that appears on the row. If you have the Sentry on the back row, every allied unit that moves gets a boost. Yeah, this card is so good because you can double up on the points, and it's a 5 for 7. It should be pretty easy to get value from it.
I think it goes into probably every movement deck.
Yes.
It's not going to be very hard to get the value out of, is it?
Yeah, we rated this a 4. I don't think I mentioned. So yeah, very strongly reckon.
It's just, I mean, you can play this in any Scoia'tael list, really, aren't you? Like in any sort of long round, it's just going to find some pretty good good value.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Devotion Precision Strike list that a few of the members of Team Kreve has been playing and pioneered by our very own Condor. You could use this instead of like the Ida or the Dunker slot and double up on like your bleeding round with Oak to get just another crazy point play and get more resources.
It is essentially just a cheap Oak, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is without the ability to kill something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the random damage, but I mean it's 7p. You don't.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's
The
5 for 7 with that ceiling is so nice. I reckon.
Yeah, it's a great card.
How often is it going to play for less than 10? You know, I don't think. Like this card's got an incredibly good ceiling, and I think it's going to be a very consistent ceiling, and might even see a nerf.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Maybe a prov nerf. Maybe it ends up as
there
an
are
8.
other targets for nerfs before this, though. Moving on.
Brehen. Now, I'm sure this is one that everyone's excited about. The Scoia'tael Tall Punish that we've been so desperately needing. Deploy. Destroy the rightmost unit on an enemy row with at least 5 units. A Gentleman 3. Destroy the rightmost unit on the enemy row with at least 3 units instead. We mark this down as a 3.5. I think in Guerrilla Tactics it's easily a 5, but I don't think we can give a card a 5 based off just the leader ability. I'm so excited for it though. It's really, really cool, everything about it. But the two biggest issues with it are, one, you really do need Guerrilla Tactics as a leader to make it unconditional. Otherwise, you're relying on other setup on the board to make it happen. And two, the card's dead in a round 3. In a short round 3, especially a 3-card round 3, this card just does nothing. Your opponent can just
4 for 8
sequence, and yeah, that's its biggest downside, which I think is fair because we are getting, like I said, a Tall Punish for Scoia'tael, which isn't something we've had.
As you said, it's like auto include in a Guerrilla Tactics list. Yeah, you pretty much said it right. The problem is the brick in round 3, and you kind of need to be running that leader. You could start running some movement in an ST list, maybe a Dragoon.
Malena can set this up.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the movement archetype is getting buffed, but like we don't see Malena at all right now.
No, I mean you'll run her in this type of list though, I would imagine.
Yeah. So
yeah, this one, I think. Brehen Malena sounds like a very sketchy combo, though. I think like people are going to put high value on removing Malena.
You have to remove Malena in this kind of list, or
in this kind of meta, I think you have to kill Malena with these cards that we're seeing. So yeah, I think you could definitely do it, but you're really risking yourself. And if you're stay woke to Brehen, remember guys, play to the left.
Yeah, and I don't think you're not playing Malena in a normal ST list like outside of Guerrilla Tactics just to run this card. I don't think. Okay, so our ST location, the Sticker Castle. We've got Spawn and play a Cat Witcher Adept, Cat Witcher, or Cat Witcher Mentor, or Cat Witcher Saboteur, and then the auto move 3 allied units to the other row. So again, they're pushing this movement archetype. We've given this a 2.5. It seems very decent in the movement decks that you'll be running. The bronzes that you can pull here make a lot of sense for that sort of deck.
Yeah, definitely. Like another Cat Witcher Saboteur, which you're going to be able to take advantage of units that are already stacked up straight away, super strong. The Cat Witcher Mentor, you're still going to get good synergy with. This, maybe we're a little bit hesitant on the 2.5. Maybe it is actually a 3 now that we really look at the strength of the bronzes.
Yeah. I believe Van was the one who rated it a 2 and brought the score down a little bit.
I take it back. I'm sorry.
The one time then is the -1.
I know.
Outed by Lamoni.
But yeah, and again, like we're getting some fucking really good engines as well if you want to from this card. I think this is a pretty good location. I think this is definitely on the stronger side of them.
I think it's solid. But moving on from this fairly good card to what we think is not as good of a card. This one we rated as a 2, so a bit underpowered. And yeah, like this card is very interesting though. So I'm not sure if I have the artifact version here, but basically what this card does is on the order. Yep. So you can transform this 7 for 9 into an artifact, and this artifact will, at the start of your turn, damage all enemy units that are alone on their row by 2 and transform back into the 7 power form. Now, note, you don't get to decide when this damage is done. It happens automatically at the start of your turn, so the opponent has a chance to react to what you're doing to try to set up this damage. It can get some value at the start of a round. If you get at least 1 ping of damage, it's going to be 9 for 9. A bit more, it can be 11 for 9. Movement can be used to set it up, but again, the opponent has a chance to react. And if they can play multiple units in one row, in one turn, they'll probably brick this card pretty easily. The interesting thing to note is this card is effectively immune to anything but a heat wave because you can keep transforming it into the artifact form, which can't be interacted with, obviously. And we'll go back to this 7 power form at the end of the round.
It's like what it does is good, and like obviously your opponent's never ever going to want to spend a heat wave on this artifact, right? Like it's just going to feel really bad if you heat wave this.
Yeah.
The problem is like the longer the round goes on, just the less and less value you get. It stops engineering. It just starts becoming a 7 for 9. In reality, you can play a Pavko or a Boar. You're already in a movement synergy sort of list, so you've got Malena with your Boar.
Expensive.
There's a lot of ways to get 2 points a turn that isn't additional like a Saber-Tooth Tiger.
Yeah, it's not terrible to slam first card and just turn it into the artifact. Your opponent can't interact with your board outside of a heat wave, which they don't want to do. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is expensive and it's very easy to play around. It's kind of funny against Magni though.
Yeah.
Funny, you're playing 9 provisions to be funny against Magni.
Yeah, exactly. When you can just
And in
rebuke
movement,
it.
you should be able to deal with Magni shenanigans.
Exactly. So again, it's an awesome design. I love the art. I actually love the way it shifts from that to that stealth and that. But
Super cool.
again, is it doing something that cards aren't already doing for Scoia'tael? Gezris, here we go. This one's had a lot of hype around it for sure. We ended up settling on a 3.5 as a group. It's definitely strong. We just felt there was a few things that really held it back. I know we haven't been rating many cards like this, but if we're expecting the meta to be what the meta is, which is going to be SK and Scoia'tael at the top, Gezris is kind of just hot garbage if they have an Arnegaard on the board. I think that's the biggest issue with this card. It goes off. It's got a massive ceiling. It's got a heap of text. It's going to do a heap of things, but it also puts its points everywhere else. So it's only probably going to engine a turn unless you got some movement to protect it and get it back behind a defender because it is just a 5 body.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is it needs to survive to probably get the value that you want. If you play this and get full value on a row, you're getting 13 without any other synergies happening. And then it's got a decent chance to die before then. And like you said, Arnegaard just kills it before it does anything. It plays for 5 points. And that's what's damaging Arnegaard.
The opponent can also play around this because if you look at the card text, he will only ever damage the opponent's melee row. So if they play into the ranged, Gezros just won't deal damage onto the enemy side. However, the nice thing is that it just has a very nice deployability, which should be able to get value. And again, it's just acting into the engine overload. If your opponent is saving removal for the Gezros, that's one more removal that they don't want to spend earlier in the round, and your other engines might be able to stick.
And obviously, we're just talking about when you play it as Adrenaline 3. We're not even thinking about playing it before then.
No, I don't.
If you know the opponent's list in like open deck lists, and you know you can get away with it, play this early.
But yeah, on ladder, you need to slap this down, and you need to get at least those 12 points out of it because otherwise you might as well be playing an Oak.
Yeah.
So
it's very expensive.
Yeah,
but
I want it to be good. I really want it to be good because
it's got a very high ceiling.
It's awesome.
It's a risky 12p card.
And strategically as well, like I know you're going to play into row punish, stacking rows against this movement-based archetype, but they're going to be pushing you into that row punish anyway, so you might as well just, remove that melee value from them and stack range row against Scoia'tael from here on out, aren't you?
Yeah, and this is kind of the only... There's nothing in Scoia'tael that kind of incentivizes you to play melee row besides those bowmen, but they're not going to matter in this matchup.
So now we've got SK. Let's do it. This is the one we all clearly agree that this is going to be the most powerful set, basically just because typical SK cards, you don't even need any synergy to just get big powerhouse units on the board. Let's get into it.
So our first card is the Witcher Adept, and we settled on a 3.5 for this. It's a very solid 4P that plays for 4 and then goes to 7 or eats removal. It works well with protectors. The downside, I think, is the current SK lists are all warrior lists, or mostly warrior lists outside of Lippy, and it is a Witcher. But that might be a little, not too much of a downside. We maybe could have gone with 4 for this one. And like, if you compare it to the NG bronzes, if it was an NG bronze, it would be in every NG deck.
Yeah, it's a 7 for 4, which we're used to getting from Skellige. It heals itself, like you said. It might eat removal. People might feel happy trading up with removal on this. I don't think I do. I think you just let this go to 7, don't you?
Yeah.
Kind of like the mini greatsword.
You're happy if it eats removal.
And the nice thing is, this also has synergy with self wounds. Not only is it a 7 for 4, but like it acts as a self wound damage sponge.
Yeah, which we'll
is
see.
just good.
We'll see the value of very, very shortly. But I don't think there's
and
much
it
more
gets
to say
armor
than
for
this.
Martyrdom as well. Like, yeah, this card is just good.
It just grows armor as well, which is kind of awesome.
Like, why not? It's Skellige. Let's just let it grow armor. So Armor Up probably seems to be one of the weaker Skellige cards from the set. It plays itself as just a 5 for 5, dealing 2 damage and spawning 3 Witcher students that are actually damaged to 1 and given 1 armor each. So the good thing about this card is it gives you a bit of self-damage swarm on your side of the board, which can be therefore used with things like Honor Guard and the Bear Witcher Mentors to double up on those points. However, as a 5 for 5, I don't really see this being played just because of that's not a great stat line at base. And because of that, we decided to give this card a rating of 2.
Yeah, we just don't expect it to really see much play. It doesn't really, like, it synergizes well, but at 5 provisions, it's just better cards that you can run there. I don't know what it is, but I really, really like the art on this card. Like, I know it's simple, but I just really, really enjoy the art on this card for some reason. Makes me feel like I'm kidding up to go off in The Witcher 3 again.
Yeah, definitely. It's also a raid, so it is tutorable, which is nice for this sort of card if you're going to be playing it. But yeah, 5 for 5. The self-wound damage or the self-wound synergy is nice. Also, the damage by 2 is probably not that consequential. You're not really killing anything. Maybe you're setting up something or getting a bloodthirst, but you're never really killing an engine with it.
Yeah, and if we see this being played more for battle trance list with witches, which is where I think we see most of these cards going, like you're probably running the alchemy tutor in Ermion, not Vabiorn as much. So like the raid tag, I don't think matters as much in this card in the kind of decks it wants to be played in.
Bear Witcher Mentor. Here we go. This is one of the most talked about bronzes from the set. Clearly has an incredibly high ceiling, especially when you're already damaging your own units. So deploy, boost self by 1 for every damaged allied unit. Adrenaline 3, boost self by 1 for every damaged unit instead. Card's bonkers, right? It's great reach in that long round 1 with your self damage package already, plus your Skellige. You're already damaging everyone else, doing all those sorts of things. There's not much else to say than other than it's probably going to play for like 12 or 13 points a round, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it definitely has a huge ceiling. It's a little scary at 5p.
It's a lot worse against, I guess, like Scoia'tael and NR cards that are boosting and protecting their units in that way. But you've still got, the self-pain synergy to find that value on it.
You want to make sure you're running the self-win synergy. The armor's a little weird, just makes it even better against random damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know we rated this before. Though looking back on it, I think it could be a little bit awkward. Granted, because if you look at the self-damage deploy for allied units, there's actually, looking at it again, there's not that many good ways to get a lot of just red health on your side of the board in with the actual self-wound package, because a lot of the cards you want to be playing will be actually mitigating that self-wound.
Yeah.
Then if you're in that sort of deck going for the adrenaline boost as well, you're probably not dealing a ton of damage to the opponent's side of the board. And in a warrior style deck, well, this card doesn't have the warrior tag, so you have to draw it. to be able to get that adrenaline to have payoff. So maybe it is being like a little bit overrated and can be awkward in certain decks, but still, like it just seems rather strong in its abilities.
I mean,
Yeah.
its strength lies in the fact that it's probably always going to play for at least 7 or 8 for 5.
Yeah.
There's plenty of
Just any red health
existing.
is good.
Yeah, there's plenty of existing self-wound package to help support this. You've got priests, you've already got stuff that already damages itself. It works with great swords straight away as well.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I think that's
The
the
boats as well.
yeah.
The boats are really good setup for this card. Like
Yeah,
Exactly.
red on
so-
yours, red on your opponent's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's I imagine what would be the best way to work with this card.
And that's what makes it OP. Its floor is realistically 7 or 8, and its ceiling is pretty goddamn high.
Yeah, and it's cheap. Like 5p is fine.
Yeah.
This could honestly be 6 easily. Okay, the Bear Witcher Quartermaster. This feels like a pretty good card. I think we've given this a 4 as well. So if you have 2 good self-wound targets that at least equal out the damage it plays for 8, and this makes it similar in value to a Berserker. So it's a good card to remove before it can play its order. The thing is, it is an order ability, right? So it's not a deploy. Again, the downside is maybe it's not a warrior, so our warrior decks it's not going to slot into. But for a self-wound deck, it seems like it's pretty good, especially with all the self-wound cards we're seeing.
Well, you can sort of see a world, right, where you sequence the Bear Witcher Adept into, like, it's healing itself, and then you're getting your boat set up, and you're developing all this red health, and you play your Bear Witcher Quartermaster, and then you get ready to play your Bear Witcher Mentor, and your Quartermaster can damage a couple of the Adepts. They're going to heal themselves at the end of the turn anyway, so you get them points back immediately. It gets that 8, and then you're also getting 2 more points on the Mentor. I think this bronze... We say this a lot. This Skellige Bronze Witcher package is pretty scary with the synergies and the strength of it. It's similar to the Warriors.
Yeah, like as our team member House put it, it's just a very nice synergistic self-damage card. It's in 8 for 5, and you can use self-wound synergy to get like more value out of it potentially.
Yeah, and again, just 1 random armor. Probably not really. Oh, I guess this is more like
I mean, it
something
is
you
an
have to
engine
kill.
in a
Yeah,
way.
this one makes a bit more sense than the others, I guess.
Okay, the Bear Witcher. So this is a potentially very strong bronze. So normally it's just going to damage itself by 3 and play as a 5 for 5 with 3 red health, but that's only in the first half of the round. In the second half of the round, when the Adrenaline 4 is triggered, it's going to play as an 8 for 5, not bad, 3 damage onto the opponent's side, not bad, and give you some red health, which can give self-damage synergy and healing synergy, not bad. And for all those reasons, this card is a 3 actually. In retrospect, maybe I would be
Yeah.
giving it a bit more.
I think we ended up deciding
Me
them
too.
down to about 3 because, I mean, it is an 8 for 5 still, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it is a little bit harder to get the red health back out of this unit as opposed to like a lot of the other ones. And there's going to be a lot of red health on your board, so I don't know how well you can truly rely on, say, Battle Trance's other ability, its passive ability, to actually sort of be getting that value specifically on this card. But with something again like Bear Witcher Mentor, you're getting red health on both sides of the board with this card. That's another 2
which is
points
just
on
what
your
you
on your
want.
Mentor. So yeah, it is definitely strong.
It's just a question of what are you missing to play this card? Like there seem to be a lot of 5p or 4 or 5p cards that you want to be playing.
This
and
is
maybe,
probably the
just maybe like there's other 5s that you want instead. Although the thing with this is the adrenaline is pretty easy to get because you never really care about playing this early. Like there's no reason to play it early.
Yeah.
You just set up your engines, play this like after the engines are on board.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I would
think-
probably give this a 4 in retrospect.
Well, I think Van raises a very valid point, and I think I'd stay happily with my 3 in that I think you're playing the other 5 provisions over this one. The other one sort of
That's
synergize
fair
better.
as well.
This one does get to put some points on the opponent's side of the board, which is always good. But yeah, I just think, you know, there's a lot. Like, how many 5 provisions can you run, right? We're already running like long ships and stuff like that. It's going to be a bit of pressure on that slot.
Yeah.
Good. This is mine. This is a card that I was super excited about when I saw it straight away. I thought it looked really, really strong. Spawn a Deafening Siren on the opposite row and damage all units on that row by 1 on deploy. And then if you've got Adrenaline 4, spawn a Deafening Siren on the opposite row and damage it by 1 instead. So this is one of the Adrenaline cards that actually get worse the longer the round goes on. So obviously this is how they're balancing that card. You need to be using it by turn 4. I think 6. Yep, 6 cards turn 4 to really get the most value out of it. I'm seeing that there's going to be a lot of row stacking in this meta, isn't there? You're going to have Scoia row stacking. There's going to be a lot going on, so I don't think it's going to be that hard for this card to play well above its provision rate as card 4 in turn 1. It also has some really, really good synergies going into other rounds. If you're running it in Warriors, say, it can turn on a Blood Eagle. If you're worried about bricking your Blood Eagle, you just play it, you get the Siren, you kill it. It's also putting red health on the opponent's side of the board. It's just a super, super strong 7, and I can see it easily just replacing Herkja in Warriors, even though it's not tutorable.
Yeah, and so we don't see the category on this card. Do we know if
It's a
It is
Witcher.
a
It's a
warrior.
Witcher. Yeah.
it's a
There's
Witcher?
no
Okay.
It's a
warriors
Witcher.
with that.
It's a Witcher.
Okay, no worries. So, also, just one thing, the premium art to this is going to be pretty intense, I reckon.
Yeah,
That's all I got to say.
This is a cool car, looking car. I mean, I'm biased. I'm a Skellige man. I love the blood and the guts and the glory and just punching things in the head. So this is, very much my kind of car.
It's a 7 for 7 base, easy way to get red health. You can double up on the synergy. It's good.
And Junod of Belhaven. So this is a bit of an awkward card. If something like Crack or Onslaught, was doing well in the meta, it's obviously an auto include because it just kills anything that you can get to red. But because it's not kind of in the meta, we've given this a 2. It's maybe not bad in a Herald list, but again, it's a Witcher. And there are some matchups, like if you hit a Goliath, for example, it's huge, but there's also matchups like, say, NR and ST, where it actually might be hard to find a target and could potentially brick.
I think it's brickability that really brings it down to that too, isn't it? Like, it's going to be hard to consistently find value. The place that's going to find the most value is probably, like you said, monsters with a Goliath or the SK Mirror. If you're looking to play this for the SK Mirror, you're better off just running Twergvi, I think.
Yeah, it's also like 9 isn't cheap.
No, definitely not.
It's pretty much just the old Vabjorn, which didn't see too much play. I could maybe see this in a list with the back row boats. I think the Dimon Light longships, where you can set up that damaged enemy units fairly easily without having to play Onslaught. But
Yeah.
again, I don't think it will be played that much. So the Skellige location, we decided to give this card a 4. And as we said, like the Skellige bronzes from this expansion seem really solid, so being able to just play one, and particularly off your choice, is just good. If you're probably running this in a list with some form of red health, so the heal will probably get some value, especially if you manage to get the heal to connect with Honor Guard. It's basically like a cheaper Svarblood totem that with synergies will get a somewhat similar amount of points. It's just strong, it's just flexible, it's just, I think, really solid.
Definitely the best location. Again, it's just doing SK things as SK likes to do. Just play for good, solid points with removal around it. Said you've just got every single one of those cards that spawns synergizes with your healing ability as well on the card. So yeah, it's super strong location.
Yeah, the bronze package for Skellige seems to be the best synergies you can find in this set, and then you just get to play another one of them, and then the auto ability is just great as well. You're going to find value from that.
Okay, guys, here's a big one for me. This is my MVP for the set, Dire Bear. I don't know. If you're an SK main, I don't think there's anything you can't like about this card. It's just super awesome design. It does a really, really cool effect. It's this reverse Kahir thing that's going on. If you're playing against NR or this new Scoia'tael deck and stuff like that, and they're stacking all these units on a row and trying to get these engines happening, you just play a Dire Bear, turns everything off, and you don't even have to spend any removal on engines. It's an 8 for 9, super big body. Nice to triangle, as do most of these cards in this set. But if you can stick this behind a defender, stretch your opponent's removal, and they're trying to boost, this card's just going to absolutely smurf in a lot of matchups, I think. I expect to see it nerfed at some point. It is dead in the Skellige Mirror, but it's still an 8 body card, so how dead can it really be?
It's about as dead as Morkvog in the Mirror, which is not terrible. It's still just decent points per active. Good.
It goes without saying this was a 5 for us too, guys.
Yeah,
And
easy 5.
in Skellige, you're not boosting anything, so you don't really care that it's blocking your row from being boosted.
I mean, it depends, because... Okay, so like the Battle Trance list does do quite a bit of boosting. I don't see it being played there.
No,
The
well, yeah, you
Witcher-
build your
yeah.
deck. to make sure you're not boot. You wouldn't put this in like a Battle Trance deck or something
Yeah,
like that.
but the Witcher list seems to be more healing based. The Warriors just don't do any boosting or healing.
Yeah.
So in those lists, it's so good.
It's awesome looking. I mean, look at the amount of swords sticking out this thing. Like this
Yeah.
dire bear. This is a big bear, man. It's huge.
Yeah.
Oh, and this card is my MVP of the set. It seems like it could be pretty insane and just match winning at times. So on deploy, it gains the 1 armor for every damage unit on both sides of the board. And then Adrenaline 4, which is when you want to be playing it. You probably don't want to be playing it any earlier than that. Whenever your opponent plays a unit, they both damage each other by their power. So you've got the armor to protect it, and your opponent has to be playing something that can survive 7 damage. And I believe this card, the damage happens at the same time, so it's not a duel or anything like that. They both get damaged. It demands to be answered. It can just be match winning if you let this card live. Like, your last 4 cards could just die without really doing anything.
And it kind of, directly counters a lot of the other decks that are using this sort of Adrenaline 4 last say engine mechanic too. A lot of the engines are taking a big chunk of damage from this if it lives. I can see this being played in any SK deck quite easily. You can just slap it in. But Battle Trance is where it's kind of scary, right? It's going to have armor come down. You just boost it by 9. It's going to be on 16. There's not much that survives that.
No, you put this behind a defender. Like, if you have a defender on the board, you have no worries about making this as tall as possible, and then you're just killing everything that gets played. It's
super.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's just like, if you're ahead when you play this card, you're gonna stay ahead. Like, even if you play it as last say to try and cuck your opponent's last say, if you're ahead when this card comes down, like if your scores higher before it hits, they can't ever get in front of you again if you Marjoram it, basically. So it's kind of bonkers.
Yep. And it being 7, like, it really, the only thing that's killing this is a heat wave.
Maybe a pog slide, but you probably get enough armor for it not to matter.
I guess damaging it is good. Like, you need a way to heal this back up if it does get pog slide, something like that, because then it's only on 1 when they play their next unit, or it's on a low amount depending on the armor.
I could see this card becoming a trap depending on how the list is built. This could be the only unit that ends up going toll and is just the designated heatwave target. But yeah, it just seems so strong. An easy 5 out of 5.
Yeah. Also, does he not look like he can just crush every other Witcher skull with his hands?
Yeah.
Like, he just looks like
his ability matches the art.
Yeah, he is a big boy. And
with the toll removal thing, I think you're probably wanting to play defender in a list that you're playing this in to try and get the heat wave. Maybe
which
even
forces
6,
out
right?
the Purify if they are running it, and if they aren't, then they probably just win anyways.
Yeah.
All right, on to Syndicate. Now, this is actually, when the self-poison archetype was first dropped, everyone was very, but now that we've sort of seen stuff like Salamander and the payoff cards for it, this is either going to be a total flop or it's going to be really, really strong and really, really fun.
We've been pretty optimistic about most of these cards, starting with the Salamander Lackey. So if you've gained at least 1 coin in a turn, at the end it will boost itself by 1. So it's your typical 4 provision, 4 for 4, a conditional engine. I don't see it getting that much play in a traditional hidden cache list, but if you end up being able to play it with something like Townsfolk or the newly introduced Blenheim Brothers, hopefully I didn't butcher that too much, it can start ticking fairly consistently, but it's a bit conditional for a 4 provision engine, and for that reason we put it at 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious why they've made it. It's a nice 4 provision engine for this Salamandria type archetype. So, like, there's definitely something they needed, yeah. But in terms of engines, it is pretty underwhelming. How many coins are you going to be making? You're not going to really want to be spending the Blenheim Brothers, round 1. I probably did butcher that, so you're fine, Lemon.
Yeah, it's nice that it's 4p. It's a cheap engine potentially. But there are probably other cards you want to be playing as well, and stronger engines, I'd say.
Stolen mutagens. So, I mean, it has flexibility, which is always kind of good. It's going to have really good synergy within the Salamandra list. The only real issue with this card is the if you control at least 3 Salamander units, profit 3. We gave it a 1.5 just because of this clause. If it was unconditional profit 3, this card's just a 7 for 5 as a base, or an 8 for 5 if you want to get the coins, which is really, really good. Unfortunately, if you don't have the Salamanders, it's a literal 5 for 5 or 4 for 4. So it's got a pretty big downside for a somewhat lackluster upside.
And
Yeah.
in a traditional crimes list, you're probably struggling to swarm with Salamander, especially after the portal nerf. The best way to do that would be Alzur. And the opponent will probably kill some of the scarabs, you would think.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a crime worth playing in a crimes list. And
Yeah.
the damage only being 4 and not 5 is a big deal. But obviously that's because of the upside on the profit 3 if you can get it. But yeah, like we said, it's pretty tough sometimes to get that 3 Salamanders alive.
It's slightly better than Dip in the Pontar if you control the 3 Salamander units, but considering Dip in the Pontar, no way is seeing any play right now.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem amazing.
I mean, I guess if you do say poison is it Abomination that buffs itself?
You'd need that self-poison synergy, I think, for this card.
It does start to play as a, with the Salamanders, all of a sudden we're actually looking at a 10 for 5, but that's quite a setup board state, so...
Yeah, I mean, it does have a high ceiling, but a lot of setup, and it does feel like it's more of a self-poison card than a crime type deck.
High ceiling offset by a terrible floor.
Yeah.
Speak of the devil.
Hey, the Salamander Abomination. We ended up giving this a 2, I believe. It's kind of an interesting card, and I definitely like the art, and it is a cool design card. The Tribute 1 poison self. Whenever this unit is poisoned, boost self by 2. So you're paying 1 coin to play 7 points. So if you equate a coin to a point, you're kind of playing 7 for 6. And then you also have the Adrenaline 4. It will purify itself at the end of the turn, so you can poison it again with any other cards to get the buff by 2.
I think it's interesting. If we're wrong and the archetype and the self-poison archetype actually works, I think this card quickly jumps to a 3 or a 4. It's a big engine.
Yeah.
It synergizes really good with the other poison, the other self-poison and the thing, but on its own, it just seems a little bit is this good? Is it not? We just really have to wait and see with this one, I think.
The other issue is some of the other self-poison cards, like the ones that trigger the self-poison, including the 7 provision spender from this set. It gives you do fee 1 to boost by 2 and give poison. You're boosting this card by 4 points each turn in the last half of the round. That's very solid, but you're putting so much value into one very tall target. Yeah, you don't really want to do that usually.
Yeah, and if poison is relevant, you don't really want to be poisoning this before the Adrenaline 4 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're holding on to this card. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're really trying to look to engine it for the last 5 turns of a game, not go super tall with it, but really milk some value out of it.
Yeah, maybe 2 is a little low. It could go.
I think it is
get a lot of
actually.
points.
I think maybe we go with viable. Maybe we go with 3. I think.
Yeah, I reckon it is a 3.
Upon further reflection, and considering that it can turn into or help turn into a 1 coin into 4 points as a spender, which is easily the greatest spender that you'll ever see from Syndicate at the moment. That's kind of absurd when you think the best current spend is Philippa at 2 to 1. So
yeah, we rated this before rating the following cards, and I think the following cards are what can make this a lot better.
Yeah.
So speaking of, let's go on to some of the following cards. Now, this doesn't actually work that well with self-poison, but tributes. We think this card is a 4 and a very strong. I'm still personally not that sure on how to place this card myself. I was convinced that it can be very strong. So let's say you do pay the tribute and you do have the adrenaline at the same time. This card is able to play for I think it's an 8 for 5, which is pretty good in Syndicate, considering it's not Skellige, it's an 8 for 5. You don't manage to do that very easily and on deploy. And if you play this in the same list as Fallen Railer, you're able to double up on the tribute if you play this after the Fallen Railer. Or it can act as like a mini Fallen Railer as well, gaining coins whenever you do pay for the tributes later in the round, which a Fallen Railer list seems to be built around.
Yeah, it feels like Adrenaline 5 as well. That's not a too tough target to meet. It's not like Adrenaline 2 or 3 where you really have to hold on.
Yeah.
You have to play this, what, 4th card?
Yeah, and I mean we've got
Fifth
like
card, 5th card?
we've got like the Abomination and stuff like that too, which have got their own little tribute things that are only 1 coins as well. I think the hardest part, like, and I think this is what Lemon's sort of concerned with, is that tribute 4 is quite a lot of coins early in the round. I think this is a round 1 card. You're probably playing Tiger's Eye with it. I think getting those coins up straight away if you want to use it. You're probably playing in tribute decks and stuff like that. I think it's got a pretty good ceiling on it, like at that 8 for 5 for Syndicate, and I don't think it's going to be too hard to get that damage through adjacent units by 2, giving, you know, frigates, giving Scoia'tael board Scoia'tael row stacking, and
nice.
and it answers an Alzur in the mirror, so you no longer have to run Colt's thing just for that. So,
and the tribute 4, obviously with the leader that brings it down to tribute 3, it looks a lot better. Yeah,
that's a very good point. At tribute 3, it becomes a 9 for 5, does it? Am I doing my maths right there? Because we're spending 4 points to get 6.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
That's if Off the Books becomes good, and I like the leader design, but it does all seem a bit kind of synergistic with things like Fallen Railer.
Yeah. Now, does the Adrenaline prockets? Does the Adrenaline 5 proc itself when you play the tribute ability as well?
So the Adrenaline should work, with that tribute ability.
It will proc itself.
So then it's already at technically tribute.
Cards.
It's already technically at, like, say, tribute 3 for points' sake, which is where I think we got the 8 for 5 from
originally.
You
need the 4 to start with.
Yeah.
And it has no initial profit, so you do need to set this up at least.
And the thing is, like, you can play it. It's not something they're going to want to kill, right? So even if you do play it to remove something early on, then once you get the Adrenaline 5, you could passively be getting a coin every now and then.
It's one of those engines you look at on the other side of the board before you become familiar with it and go, how many times can they actually proc that? And it ends up being a lot. If it's a card like that, I think this is definitely stays a 4.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like the Jacques round 3 with like the Fire Sworn support with the tribute support. I guess it can get a surprising number of points and coins.
Yep.
Failed Experiment. Now, this card's kind of cool, I think. It's just, again, cool design, plays into that self-poison a lot. It's really, really good, really good reach for the non-cash Syndicate decks. So decks that aren't running your Jackals and stuff like that, who really, really struggle to get big reach out of their bronzes late in round 1. I think this is where that's going to help. It basically plays for an 8 for 5. If you've got something on the board that can give it poison as it comes down, like if you've got one of the brothers and stuff like that, it's just going to play as a 9 for 5. It's just a solid card with a like, it's really balanced as well. Like the fact that it's going to lose coins as lose points the longer it plays. You really can't play this early in case the board state continues and the round goes on. So I just think it's a great card. We've given it a 3. I think it's very viable.
Yeah. Obviously the downside is you are poisoning a very tall unit, so it gives your opponent a nice easy poison for a lot of points, because you do want to be poisoning this to get the ability turned off.
Like, the other thing is you can just like last save this in round 1, easy 8 for 5.
Yep, it is good in a long round 1 just for some points, and maybe at that point there's less chance of a poison coming out, so it's a safer poison.
I mean, not many decks have access to poison as well, so I think you can just sort of.
I don't think Scoia'tael's going to be playing it. It's mainly the Mirror and Nilfgaard you're worried about.
It's kind of if you do bump into Nilfgaard, it just turns into a really good mulligan target, doesn't it? Or again, you can still just.
I mean, a lot of this deck would become mulligan targets.
Yeah,
I think probably actually just becomes an escape enter.
Yeah, we're gonna see a lot of like probably mirrors with the Syndicate self-poison, which is going to be really interesting.
I want to see those mirrors.
I think it's going to happen a lot, and it's going to be
I know we like to refer to Gwent as sort of, a chess game in strategy and thought, but that's going to be like a chess game where your opponents kick the board all over the place, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, Geralt Blindheim. So this card seems really good. We've given it a 4.5. And if we're counting 1 coin to 1 point, it's already playing 7 for 7. And then you've got all the self-poison synergy that we've been seeing. So you've got self poison synergy buffing itself, and then you've also got the poison allied unit giving it the buff by 2 as well. The cooldown 1 means you can use it every turn, so it kind of probably does demand an answer in a self poison deck. It just seems like a really, really nice card.
This card's cool as well. The Syndicate cards are cool. There's a super ruler cool going on here, I think. Like, the brothers are really nice. They synergize really well. Just, it's an awesome feel, this self-poison. Whether it's good or not, who knows? I think we gave it a 4, you said, didn't we, Ben?
We gave it a 4.5, actually.
And the big reasoning behind that is it's a simple 1 coin to 2 point conversion, which the only card currently in the game which can do that is the Philippa, and that's on a, not really a tribute, but like basically a tribute. And it's not a consistent spender like the Geralt can be. The downside is that you're giving an allied unit poison, so you can't repeatedly buff the same unit unless it's that
the one that takes it off.
Abomination.
Yeah,
I forget the name
Abomination.
of it with the bronze.
Yeah,
And it is stuck on a cooldown of 1, so
Yeah,
you can't just repeatedly abuse this.
You do have to engine this card, say, for a few turns with its ability. So it is very balanced. It's definitely not overpowered, but I think it's strong. And again, if the poison archetype's a thing, this card's going to be massive.
Okay, so Roland Blunheim. I probably butchered the name on this guy, but yeah, we think this is potentially very strong. We gave it a 4. It's a 7 for 7, just base power. And when you look at the text, whenever a unit is poisoned, gain 2 poisons. So at the first 4 cards of the round, this will apply to enemies. Poisons are decent, and when you're getting an extra 2 coins off of them, that makes them pretty good. And then the Adrenaline 5 is where it gets interesting. It starts working with self-poison. You can start convoying him with his brother to spend that 1 coin on the fee and get 2 coins back because you're poisoning an allied unit. Also, if you pay the Salamander tribute, as we'll see in a card or 2, you manage to refill your coin bank to full pretty much, which this card just seems so strong, being able to get coins so easily with a 7 body. It's hard to remove, all that good stuff. Seems good.
All of a sudden, you don't actually need to be running cash to take advantage of spenders and tributes and stuff like that in a round 3.
Seems like a very annoying card to deal with.
Like, this plus fist attack is 6 coins and a poison.
I'm also
threatening an engine.
I'm also a little bit disappointed that the flavor text isn't on these cards. Maybe we'll get Andrew to try and flash it in over him, because the flavor text on these cards is
if you want, I can read it out.
I think we just let people find it on their own. Actually, Andrew, leave it out. You just read it. Trust us. It's just sublime.
Look
it's just
out
CD
for it.
Projekt Red
It's very nice. It's great.
The Salamander Hideout, the location for Syndicate. We've given this one a 4 because of all the self-poison cards seem pretty good here, and the order ability is also really, really nice. Moving a poison from an ally to any other unit. It's not just another allied unit, so you can chuck a poison from your side of the board onto your opponent's side of the board for a kill on the same turn that you're playing your poison, because this is an order unit. An order ability. Yeah, it seems pretty good.
It's just, I think it's a very strong location. Again, on point. The flavor's awesome. It's kind of like just an 8 provision devotion roll for Syndicate, isn't it? You get that guaranteed 1 turn poison kill, which is really hard is impossible to do without a roll. And this is just, it's all ball, but we're not talking about ball.
And the Syndicate monsters aren't terrible either from this set, so doesn't really lose any points there, I reckon.
Yeah, I think self-poison, I think everyone should try and build at least once and have some fun with.
Yeah.
It also seems like the only, maybe I'm wrong, but the only location where you've got different kind of, you've got a lot of self-poison bronzes, but you also have that Salamander Mage for damage on a tribute 4, so a bit more flexibility maybe than the other ones.
Well, yeah, and you can still use the hideout with, say, I can see this card being super strong with, say, the Fistek Trafficker, right? In that, Salamander Mage sort of list instead, where you're not looking for those self-poison targets as such, but you can bait your opponent a little bit. You can use that self-poison, and then you can sort of poison them and then play this, and there's some really cool interactions there as well. So this card synergizes really well with the existing Syndicate and incredibly well with the self-poison archetype. What was our rating again, sorry?
We gave this one a 4.
Yeah, cool. I'd believe that. Oh, again, with the failed experiment, this is also an 8 for 8. So, really good reach, and its resilience. That poison can carry over too.
Yeah.
Salamander. So, profit 1, deploy, poison a unit, tribute 9, poison all units on the battlefield instead. Increase the profit by 1 for every allied salamander unit. This card is absolutely insane. It's amazing. I didn't actually even notice the increase the profit by 1 for every allied salamander unit either. Just for the record, I just thought this card was really bonkers. But that makes it even better because on a board state where this is good, it's a long round 3 and you've probably got a lot of salamander units. Who knows if this card's going to be good? It's really hard to measure the viability of it, but the ceiling on it is just kind of insane, which is why we had to go with like a 3.5 for it.
Yeah, I imagine it definitely gets experimented with day one. It seems like one of the more interesting cards and potentially crazy cards of the set.
And cool art, very cool art.
Yeah, obviously, we don't need to say anything, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I think Andrew went as far as to call it the cutest
Yeah.
card in the set.
And
Which, I mean, to be fair, not many of the other cards are cute.
Oh, the brothers?
well, only one head's cute. The other head's a little bit messed up, isn't it?
Yeah, we ignore that head. But yeah,
But yeah.
this card, if you can combine this with morale, combine this with the location to be able to kill some enemy units quite easily. Even 2 in 1 turn if you have both of those set up. You could have played a bunch of offensive poisons at the start of the round and just use this to detonate them all. If you have self-poison units on your side of the board, you can trigger them. It just seems very, very strong.
And
Which is just poison everything and go crazy.
We're all looking
Yeah.
forward to the Salamander Mirror, I think.
Oh, definitely. The other thing about the card too is you can just poison a unit as a finisher if you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously the one strength is a bit of a downside there. Like you do
Yeah,
want to be
definitely.
paying that tribute, but
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
it could be enough.
if you've got a salamander board state, it's going to profit, so you're going to be able to spend those coins, and it might still play as say an 8 or a 9 for 10, potentially depending on board state. But yeah, I think
And combine this with Fallen Railer, which I think is the next card.
Yeah.
And the last one. So yes, Fallen Railer. This was the last card in the set for this review, and fittingly we decided to give it a 5. We think this card is potentially very, very powerful. Now, you have a 4-card window at the end of the round 3, because this is usually where you would see the Fallen Railer. It's your typical finisher. You pay the profit 3 to get the tribute 3. It pays for itself. You get Veil, helps with self-poison, and with this adrenaline, you'll be boosting itself by 3. Then if you can follow up with a thing like a Jacques, a Salamander, you're double dipping on those tributes. You pay, say, the 9 tribute on Salamander, the 4 from the Jacques. That's an extra 13 points. Fallen Railer just became like a 21 for 11, which isn't bad. You're playing very solid tributes in and of themselves. This card has such a high ceiling, and yeah, just seems very, very powerful.
Yeah, such a high ceiling with the only way to deal with it is killing it.
5.
And the Adrenaline 3 isn't something that is costing you anything. Like, you just have to play it at that time, which is what you're going to do anyway. So it is a pretty scary card.
guaranteed bail.
Yep.
Perfect finisher for your salamander list as well. All of a sudden, you just wipe the board and you've just got a Fallen Railer left on 2,846 points, and off you go to the races. This card for me is just like epitomizes like the whole idea behind this set and what the guys have done. Like, there's just so much awesome, intricate design. Fallen Railer can just go into any SY deck that runs tributes and feel good.
The thing is, it plays for 5 the turn you play it, and it's pretty hard. You want to maybe hit it with a brother to buff it by 2 at that point.
Yeah.
It plays for an 8 if you're triggering its own tribute.
Oh, so it gets its own
it will
tribute,
count itself.
right?
Yes, it will count
And
itself.
at that point,
wow.
Pog Slide can answer it.
Also,
yeah.
when you're playing a syndicate list, typically, your opponent's generally going to be out of most of their removal by the time you get
it's an
down
engine
to
overload, so
down to
it'll be
here,
interesting
like-
to see how exactly the self-poison shapes up
this
and how many
is-
engines, but
It is a 5.
yeah, this is a
or an 8,
threat they
but-
have to watch out for, I reckon.
And she's, again, awesome art.
Yeah, art is top-notch, design is top-notch, I think, in this expansion. I cannot wait for it to release.
So that's it for the cards from this set. We're going to throw over to a special guest. Okay, guys, if you haven't guessed by now, this is our special guest. We have got the Kungfoorabbit. If you don't know who he is, you definitely need to get on Twitch and check him out because his streams are just awesome and wholesome and a great place to hang out. So Rabbit's brought something very special for us today. What have you got, my man?
Hello everyone, and yeah, Kungfoorabbit is the name. Check it out, links are probably somewhere below. And what we have for this expansion is a set of cards. I welcome my viewers to Witcher School of Rabbit when we have new followers and such. So we decided to introduce some cards from Rabbit Witcher School. CDPR sadly didn't force them into the game, but nevertheless, the set is done. We, in collaboration with Paps, who you might know, but as an author of some Redraim and Fireball emotes, he did an amazing job on those cards. So as you can see, one of them, Rabbit Witcher Adept, a syndicate inclusion to the Rabbit School of Witcher. Yeah, it has a lot of text. It has a powerful ability requiring you to do some math, but in the end, you can just rely on it as a bonded condition on melee, doing 3 damage on the second copy, and also playing as an 8 for 4.
An 8 for 4.
You might rival Skellige with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
somewhat.
We've seen a couple 8 for 5s come from Syndicate, but yeah, an 8 for 4. Like, this is definitely something Syndicate could use, and it's a bronze, so we can play 2 of them.
Need to check the artist names. The artists for these cards are pretty great.
Brian
I think
Bodrick.
they are somewhat related to like some CDPR employees. Brian Bodrick is probably famous for like community work in CDPR.
Trolls a lot of Twitch communities in CDPR, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I can't help but question, right? If you just go back to that last card, you can tell this is like a very big brain card. What would the average like result of the Euler, Riemann, Zeta function be on this card?
Yeah, good question. I checked the function, but my brain wasn't capable of that. I'm gonna be just throwing this card onto the board and seeing the result. And then if the result is subpar, you know, there is always a route of blaming game developers for throwing like such a weak card into the card pool.
How do you balance a card like this during development?
We looked at the current set and then printed something that
just did whatever.
that should not power creep other cards. But still, add some new ways to interact with your deck, opponent's deck, and with math.
And
yeah, when are we getting the maths expansion for Quen? I can't wait.
And I think it's very important to point out that this is a Witcher, Austrian, and a plant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We forgot about the tags. So yeah, you know, Flake does a lot of work for CDPR promoting the plant archetype, but sadly Archispore is not getting buffs, and Archispore sadly doesn't get a full archetype built around it. So with this card, we tried to introduce a plant. I'm not sure why it appears in Syndicate, but it's first step. So it just sets its roots and then it spreads across card database, and maybe in a few expansions we'll get like 5 plant cards in total.
All right, on to the next one.
Great.
So yeah, that's the initial card that I got from Paps. The first one, I didn't even have like official reveal yet. Maybe this card was what brought the official reveal like to me. Gave me an opportunity. Maybe CDPR noticed that. So artist of this card is worth mentioning, Jason S. Lama. He might, you might have heard of him, or maybe you've seen him here and there during the development videos.
Straight away.
So that's Rabbit Witcher from NR. He has appropriate tags. He has appropriate armor. And he has Adrenaline 10 condition. Everyone goes like, Adrenaline 10 condition, why would you need that? But consider a situation where opponent plays a card and you manage to like play Mata using double cross leader, get to 10 cards and like play that and then fill your hand with opponent's Mata. It's amazing. It's so contrived. It's so hard to achieve for 1 damage.
I mean, it's the only Adrenaline 10 in the set, isn't it?
What? Sorry?
It's the only Adrenaline 10 to be introduced into the set,
Yeah, it's
isn't it?
only Adrenaline 10 in the set.
But the rabbit school.
Yeah. But the card is still working. Like at the end of the turn, it's easy to understand. It damages a random boosted enemy by the difference between number of cards in graveyards multiplied by the total power of adjacent neutral beasts with odd provision cost. So you start calculating that on your first turn when you get Adrenaline 10 condition, and by the end of round 2, you maybe calculate your first value of damage.
And it's
Witcher
Estonian.
It's also has Estonian tag. I don't know. It's probably just a foundation. Like we have a couple.
Estonia existed in The Witcher. I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's like Redania, Estonia, the neighboring states.
I love the art on this card too. Like this Witcher really looks like a badass.
Yeah. So we go to the next one. So this is like the art rework from the official Griffin Witcher mentor. You can check, like, Rabbit Witchers are serious about their business. They have 3 swords, and the third sword, the rabbit one, is brought to trip only to chop carrots.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really a fighting sword unless you met a really spooky carrot that you need to slay. So yeah, they have crossbows with carrots, and as you see, the adept was climbing the tree to retrieve the carrot that he shot and missed his target. So target practice is something that he needs more of.
Do they grow their own carrots, or do they tend to buy them?
That's the secret of the school. You need to join the school to get full information.
And wait, do rabbit witches know how to do kung fu?
Sure, but not adepts, and probably like only some few mentors.
Right. Okay.
So tell us, it's the same ability, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same ability on this one, and the artist also kept the same. You can also like check the medallion. It's not a wolf, it's not a griffin, it's actual like
you can see the rabbit.
It's an actual rabbit. So the craft on this card is amazing. Like,
was this Pabst as well, was it?
Yeah, Pabst did it.
Wow.
Like on the same day when I got reveal. He did all the armor upgrades, all the weapon upgrades, talisman.
That's
like,
insane.
Yeah, this looks amazing.
Insane, like
it's professionally
you can sell this one like as an official card.
Yeah, this one's amazing.
If others, you can see some irregularities. And simplicity of edits. That one is like OP. So the next one, you guys probably love Lippy, right? Like every Gwent player does. So what do we need more? In Skellige, we need more Lippy support. The card has veteran 2 tags. So by the round 3, you have 8 at 11 power. And the card also has my favorite text, like Adrenaline 5. Summon this unit from your graveyard into a random non-melee ally throw. So does CDPR link us to the fact that maybe Siege Row comes back at one point? Or is it only non-melee row being ranged row? I don't know. We haven't had an opportunity to test where does it jump. How many rows is there?
Now this
Remember-
is actually fairly balanced when you compare it to say like a original Twerkvy or something like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't
region
have as
of
high
the-
of a ceiling, so it has at least some limit.
Yeah.
And it's a Witcher Pirate Warrior.
Yeah, so a lot
pirate
of people,
support.
a lot of people are concerned that the new expansion, new cards have only Witcher tag. So if warriors remain as strong as they are at the moment, you cannot play Witcher, so because you cannot tutor that. This card, it's pirate and warrior, so it goes in any Skellige deck. He sadly is not a druid. That's like, but yeah, the printing of druid tag on that was stopped by Kahir. Kahir just wanted to have them all tags.
Yeah, fair enough.
So Hefty Rabbit Witcher Agent. It's a spine unit. It's a 7 for 7, so you can say, what is this? Another Vypper? Or not? So yeah, it's Witcher, Siege Engine, and Aristocrat. It's combo. Also, a lot of people were asking, did you test the card? Does the agent feel into that Siege Engine? Doesn't he get stuck when shot away? Nah, the testing was done. The quality control was done. He's very flexible. He fits into that hole, and he shoots to opponent's side of the board. It gains statuses, 3 of them, Shield, Immune, and Veil on opponent's side. So it procs all your Thirsty Dames, all your other concerned cards, like Seditious Aristocrats, and then it jumps back to opposite melee row. So you gain the statuses procced. Yeah.
It's a highly synergistic card.
Yeah, it's
Fine.
slightly synergistic with Bribery as well.
Yeah. It's good to see some tactic support. I've been missing
Yeah.
the good old Stefan Elderbear archetype.
Yeah, and spawning
have
his
it
Stefan's
So
pretty good.
those cards are available on my Twitter. So if you can zoom it later, like on your own, you can see that that agent actually has Stefan Skellen cards in his hand. So Stefan Skellen card synergy is also in the text. Whenever you play tactics, spawn a Stefan Skellen with the power equal to the provision cost in the ranged row. So it immediately puts a Stefan ready to go next turn. And yeah,
I'm
on
glad we
Adrenaline
finally got to
7,
see.
whenever you play Bribery, you add 1 counter to these cards. So it spawns more and more of them Stefans.
I'm really glad that we finally get to see the Nilfgaard buff that we were so dearly promised.
Yes,
yeah,
Nilfgaard's
I think
been needing
This
this.
is really, it takes us
Yeah,
away
and
from the ball archetype pretty quickly, and now we just
Yeah,
get
and
to go
art
into
is
captains.
also
Yeah,
art
it's
is
great.
also very helpful, done well by
yeah.
the artist
It's
called
amazing.
Brenna today and Vizima tomorrow. They are like rising stars in our department.
Oh gosh.
Oh, it's a Witcher Siege Engine Aristocrat as well. So
Yeah.
will this will still proc your ball as well? So this is just
Yeah,
this
this
is
is
perfect.
perfect for Bowl and
This is
Slave.
perfect.
Like this is right. Like gonna keep Nilfgaard in the meta, I reckon.
Nilfgaard's fixed.
Yeah.
Reddit, come at me.
So this card's name can cause some flashbacks from people who played beta. We had Imlirit Sabbath, but now we have Scoia'tael unit, Rabbit Witcher Sabbath. It doesn't duel. It has Adrenaline 1 condition. The art was done by Pavel Bourgeois. And yeah, at the end of your turn, it discards the 3rd leftmost card and boosts random allied bronze Witcher on the other row by its power. So you need to time it correctly. I don't know how do you get to discard the 3rd leftmost card on Adrenaline 1 condition. It's something for players to figure out. Maybe card wasn't tested enough.
I was just about to ask, what happens when you don't have 3 cards in hand?
Yeah, that's what I say. We didn't test the
Didn't
card
test it.
completely. It's just a test prototype. If it doesn't work, it still plays as a wholesome 3 for 8.
I mean, it's not the first time the community's play tested a card, so I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder how a card that has Adrenaline 1 doesn't get play tested for when you have 1 card in hand. But like, What do I know?
Yeah.
And it's a Witcher Estonian again.
Yeah, so there are a couple of Estonians, and yeah, the hairstyles difference representation
Okay,
from
I
all the
like this
parts of the
one.
community, and this is was one of the last reveals. The rabbit, actual rabbit with the beast tag. Community were crying for Thrive 2 condition. Not crying, but some people were asking, like, you are getting assimilate to harmony to Thrive 2 when?
I mean,
I
to be
don't know
fair,
what
we've got that
purpose.
now with Koshchey. We've gotten it now.
Yeah, but now we have Thrive 3 condition on this cute rabbit. It's a vicious rabbit. You might have seen him in some movie as well, Monty Python. Yeah, featured exactly this rabbit. And unlike the best boy, Dogo rates battlefields from time to time in Lippy deck. This can rate your deck or your graveyard. So yeah, pay attention. You might end up with a card disadvantage from time to time. But if you survived till Adrenaline 4, the ability is no longer triggering in your hand.
I mean, I can
And
see
I
this
don't know
being...
if you heard of this artist Getty Images. Super popular.
I can see this card being a little meta warping, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the nice touch of 1 armor puts it on the equal footing with Larva, more or less.
Well, at least it can't be cooed now as well. That's pretty important, I think.
Yeah, you wouldn't want Lara to be played over this.
Yeah. And on the background, you can see one of the rabbit witchers.
Hunting the rabbit, I assume?
I don't know. He might be recruiting, like maybe rabbit from, like, it's strange to have rabbit witcher in monster faction, but they still try to like teach rabbits wield swords. And of course the carrot synergy is right there.
Yeah, of course, definitely makes 100% sense.
So yeah, another card, the neutral. Like the witchers are supposed to be neutral, but it's so neutral that it's basically comatose. Old rabbit Witcher comatose is Witcher Ogroid 9 for 9. It has devotion condition. I don't know. How do you trigger that? Maybe CDP are gonna introduce a neutral faction. Maybe if you play full neutrals in your in your like faction of choice, it somehow works. But yeah, and if your opponent starting deck has no 8 provision, pay attention, 8 provision, nobody knew about locations at that moment. 8 provision cost artifacts, you gain zeal. So if location is being played by your opponent, this card just got nerfed by CDPR's official reveals.
They must have found a problem.
You cannot just click the ability to click the ability. So people who wanted to exploit this card to get order contract done, like their hopes might be shattered by the location cards.
Oh, God.
Is the card designer like pictured in the art? Because like, is that what happened after designing this card to him?
Yeah. This card was like pretty vanilla. It also has no artist for some reason, so it probably was done by artist, long artist name. You might have heard of him from previous expansions, like when CDPR card descriptions got bugged. Some of the cards got credited to a lone artist name, so that's probably the case with old Rabbit Witcher Comatose as well. And final reveal was the Rabbit School founder, who is a relict, who is a construct, 18 for 14, but it damages self, it relies on your deck building and usage of relics. There is like quite a few relics in the game. And the funniest part about this card is that it has like actual card ability. I can see a card that says whenever a unit loses its armor, gain 2 vitality. I can see that being played like in some sort of Gwent deck, in Skellige probably.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, actually.
So yeah, like I was reading what Pap sent to me, and like reading this part of the text, I thought, wait a second, why don't we have a card like that already in the game?
Yeah, that is a very good point. I guess we do kind of, don't we? We've got the turtle, Draco turtle.
Use anything really.
Yeah, it's not vitality,
Not
but
quite,
yeah,
but yeah,
something like
similar.
that. Yeah, like ships also exist that boost self, and I'm pretty certain that the Rabbit School founder had some legendary battles with the Wererat that was revealed yesterday. The
I
Wererat
believe
mutant.
I
Yeah,
believe
they
it.
definitely had like some King Kong versus Godzilla fights.
Now, I'd actually originally rated Arnegard as my buff dude for the series, but I think the Rabbit School founder takes that pretty easily, doesn't it? That's a big rabbit.
Yeah, also wields 3 swords. So probably remember the actual monster rabbit. He probably got recruited, or like he got idea to recruit more rabbits. The founder of the school probably got idea to recruit more rabbits based on his own story to success. Like he was probably at one point just a wee small rabbit, and look at him now.
Fantastic. Not sure what's at the end. There we go. So that's the end of the set review. Thank you again so much, Rabbit. Before we move on and go, can you actually just give us 5 minutes, quick thoughts on the actual set, the full thing, Way of the Witcher? What do you think? What's your pick for the top deck, and how do you think the meta's gonna shape up?
Exciting time to play Gwent, certainly. The expansion day and expansion, probably first week, is the most chaotic one, usually. It's not your regular patch that changes, like, reworks a faction or changes, like, 10 cards. It's, like, entire set, and most of the stuff seems pretty decent to try out. Like Nilfgaard manipulation might be a questionable thing to like really bank on, because I refrained from rating that faction. Like the cards revealed before we've seen whole thing, and it seems like with addition of location, with addition of that. Of the last couple of golds, it might like form to something formidable that will win games. But still, I want to try Nilfgaard and its power. I'm pretty sold on self-poison being worth it for Syndicate. Like at first, when you see only like 1-2 cards, people in the community were pretty skeptical about that working out. But in total, it looks like Syndicate will be working at least some of the cards. Maybe not every card is auto include. I'm pretty hyped about monsters being very interested in both Koshchey and V.
I think monsters could potentially be the best deck. Actually, like I think it's still Skellige, but monsters could very well. That Koshchey's ability is just super scary, isn't it?
Is insane.
Yeah, sure. So, Another realms are probably asking for something like a combo deck. If you try to build a new deck, it might be a combo deck with Koen, or it might be just Witcher, small Witcher into bigger Witcher, into something like Rogner, if you do the Adept way. And maybe it just synergizes directly with the Koen, although, yeah, exact numbers are not so clear with me, and like random damage exists, that might heavily disalign your coins. So you probably need some fast and reliable way to like play cards. So maybe not Rogner, maybe you rely on those shields protecting adepts, and then you utilize your coin. And what's there? And Move and Scoia'tael is something I've been waiting long enough for. Like after not Sheldon, Brotherhook, the movement leader, got basically into an unplayable state. Movement like disappeared completely. At least like at the start of the Homecoming, like a year ago, people were playing Brewer sometimes with movement. At least a couple of movement cards, and it basically wasn't present in the meta in the past year. So pretty good to see CDPR going in the movement direction. And I'm happy that they tried to introduce like full archetypes with this in self-poison and movement. They decided to commit, and they definitely took some made some interesting moves on the cards. So I think this set I like already more than Master Mirror, and
that was a pretty general consensus between us as well.
Yeah.
Like whether we rated the cards, power high or not, didn't really reflect on the design aspects of them. I think most of the
Design
cards
seems top tier. Art seems better than ever, which is crazy for Gwent. Like, I'm excited.
Yeah, so even like if half of the cards needs nerfing somehow in the end to be not too power creeping on the current golds, I don't care. The abilities are printed and they can be adjusted.
I agree. I feel the same
So
way.
I'm happy with the design of this. Yeah, we waited 6 months for that. It was worth it though.
And SK?
And Skellige, it gets more of the same that it had, in my opinion. Like compared to movement and self-poison interactions, Skellige gets Bloodthirst, Skellige gets Arnachart card that is a force to deal with. Like people are already thinking about playing Sucrus, people are thinking about playing like stuff like Restores and other buff cards. It's probably not an all-in card, because unlike something like V, it can be heat waved most of the time.
Yeah.
So you cannot bank only on Arnachart. You kind of bank on V all in with the consumes and tutors.
And what's your
Arnachart
one favorite card from the set? What's your favorite?
I'm interested in V mechanic, like looking at the strengthening being like reintroduced, but not like a keyword, but as one card ability. It's cool. If we're speaking about what's lacking from the expansion, I definitely expected like one bronze per faction to get a devotion condition. I hope CDPR is not forgetting about the mechanics of the past, and like in the next set, maybe they reintroduce some new old keywords on the new cards.
I like
cool.
devotion as a mechanic too. I was a little bit disappointed to see less of it. I think devotion bronzes would be a really good way to power up a few of the current decks as well, a little bit.
Yeah.
Something like Nilfgaard, a good devotion bronze for Nilfgaard would be huge, I think. But anyway, I guess. Oh, you go.
Yeah, but we've seen CDPR introducing new mechanics with each expansion, and we got Adrenaline this time. And okay, locations are not exactly new mechanic, but it's like new take on artifact. It's not scenario. Yeah. It's not pure artifact. It has resilience. So I'd put it into a like new tier.
It's a new card. I think it's a new card type. It's it interacts with the board in a new way, and
it just synergize takes into itself like two different card types that we had before. So they brought Adrenaline and they brought locations into this expansion. Hopefully we'll get like more of the old mechanics introduced as well. Like I mentioned, devotion, but we see it like Thrive makes it on some cards, and probably, although I'm not sure if Intimidate was printed, but old mechanics should not be forgotten, like about completely.
I agree.
Veteran printed on anything? Don't think so.
Just the Rabbit Mentor, wasn't it? The school Rabbit Founder. Which one was it?
Okay. Yes. Just that card.
So, All right, Rabbit, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Big shout out to
was
Pabst. The artwork and that is absolutely top tier, man. You've done a fantastic job there. You should be
top notch.
super proud of yourself.
He definitely deserves a shout out. I asked him about like if there is like a count on Twitter or somewhere, but he said
for
that
sure.
he created that one, but it get banned somehow pretty fast. I guess it
does
got
he-
back
yeah.
or something. So yeah. But the Paps, you can see him in like Read Rames chat, Paps chat, and around on Twitch.
For sure.
And yeah, his creations of Big Rave, Big Rame, and Paya emotes, animated ones. You definitely use them, most of
Yes, we've definitely seen Pab's work before. So, all right, but yeah, make sure you guys go and give Rabbit a follow on Twitch. Check out his YouTube. He always uploads some interesting little deck texts and stuff. He recently did a Devotion Precision Strike list with Shiru. Changed our Team Kreve list, Condor's list. But yeah, thanks again, Rabbit. This has been awesome, and we'll see you soon.
See ya. Thanks for having
See
me.
you.
Thank you so much for that, Rabbit. That was awesome. That was a heap of fun. I love your work, what you've done there. Big shout out to Pabs too. The art, the flavour, the feel, everything about it, man. It's fantastic. I'm really glad that you brought this content to the community for us. Now, the only thing we've got left is some closing thoughts on the set, a few words from each of us, and what we think the meta's going to be, I think, and what's your pick of the decks. Lemon?
I mean, realistically, Skellige is looking to have some very strong options. I think Syndicate Self-Poison is going to be a bit of a sleeper pick, maybe underrated by some, I think, when like they have some potentially strong synergies. I think Monsters Koshchey will be a powerhouse as well.
Spot on. Dan?
I would also agree with the Skellige. I think some of those cards are just really scary, and I'm not looking forward to playing against them. But I'll definitely be playing them. And then I think Movement ST will get experimented with, and I kind of hope it's good. I'd like to see that archetype be played again. It's been a long time. Maybe next expansion we'll see some Invigorate help.
For me, again, it's got to be SK. SK is still very dominant. It's still got the strongest, bronze core and all those sorts of things that make it a very strong deck. I think second's going to be Monsters. I think Scoia'tael's been a little bit overrated. I think it's going to be quite hard to consistently get value out of the deck, especially the better the opponent, the less value you're going to find in your Scoia'tael deck, I think. Whereas Monsters with stuff like Koshchey, and they're going to be a pretty big threat, so I wouldn't be asleep on them too much. I very much think the meta is going to be a Defender Purify meta. I think everyone's going to be running Defenders because we've got all these massive engines, and if you can make them use their Heat Wave or something like that on your Defender, you're going to feel pretty good because it means some pretty big points are going to survive. All right, well, that's it, guys. Thanks you all so much for joining us. If you're still here with at the end, I know it's been a long one. Thanks for bearing with us. It's very late where we are now, so bear with the mistakes and that. We've tried our best. Again, give us a like, please subscribe, come and check us out, our Twitch channels, BFox3, I've got a YouTube channel too where we're doing deck techs and stuff like that. Lemon's over on Twitch all the time, and Van's on Twitch. Come and see us, show the love, and thank you for staying with us. We'll see you all soon.
See you.
See you later.